For 45 years, my wife Coretta went to the bank every single Tuesday, rain or shine. I never asked her why, because in a marriage built on trust, you do not check the ledger of the heart. I thought she was saving for a rainy day or perhaps sending a little help to her distant cousins in Alabama. I was wrong. When she died last week, I found a notebook hidden inside the lining of her old Sunday shoe. It had only one line written over and over again for decades. Tuesday, bank. He asked for more. That was the moment my grief turned into something cold and hard. That was the moment I realized my wife hadn't been saving money. She had been paying a ransom, and the man collecting it was standing right next to me at her grave. Before I tell you what I found in that safety deposit box, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect your family from the wolves sleeping in your own guest room. The dirt hitting the mahogany casket sounded like heavy rain on a tin roof. It was a sound I had heard too many times in my 78 years, having outlived my parents, my brothers, and now the only woman I had ever loved. I stood by the open grave, my hands clasping the handle of my cane, not for support, but to keep them from shaking. I wore my best black suit, the one Coretta had picked out for our 50th anniversary, which we would never celebrate now. Around me, the cemetery was quiet except for the stifled sobs of my daughter Maya. She was 45 years old, but today she looked like a lost child, her face buried in a handkerchief, her shoulders shaking. I wanted to comfort her. I wanted to tell her that her mother was at peace, but I couldn't move. I was frozen by the presence of the man standing next to her, Brad, my son-in-law. He wasn't crying. He wasn't even pretending to be sad. He stood there in a suit that was too tight and too shiny, checking his watch as if he had a bus to catch. He looked bored. He looked like a man waiting for a meeting to end so he could get back to business. The pastor finished his prayer. The mourners began to disperse, walking past me to shake my hand and murmur condolences that I barely heard. I just nodded, my eyes fixed on the fresh mound of earth. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. It wasn't a comforting touch. It was heavy, possessive, and dismissive all at once. "Well, Eli," Brad said, his voice too loud for a funeral. "She is in a better place now, right? At least the suffering is over?" I turned to look at him. He was 48, white, with a face that was starting to sag from too much alcohol and too little honest work. He grinned at me, a shark-like baring of teeth that didn't reach his dead eyes. "She is at peace," I said, my voice a low rumble. Right, Brad said, looking around the cemetery. "Listen, Eli, we need to talk business. I know this is a tough time, but bills don't stop for grief, you know." I stared at him. My wife was not even cold in the ground, and he was talking about bills. "What are you talking about, Brad?" I asked. "The insurance," Brad said, leaning in closer, his breath smelling of peppermint and stale cigarettes. "Coretta had a policy, right? A life insurance policy. I remember you two talking about it years ago. It must be worth a pretty penny by now." I tightened my grip on the cane. I was a structural engineer for 40 years. I built bridges that withstood hurricanes. I knew how to spot a stress fracture in concrete, and I knew how to spot a crack in a man's soul. Brad was broken. He had always been broken. "The policy is taken care of," I said coldly. "It is for Maya." Brad's eyes narrowed. "Well, Maya is my wife, so it is for us. Look, Eli, you are 78. You are getting up there. You are going to be alone in that big house. You are going to get confused. The paperwork, the taxes, the insurance claims, it is going to be too much for you." He patted my shoulder again, a patronizing tap that made my skin crawl. "Why don't you hand over the financial documents to me?" he said. "I am an investor. I know how to handle money. I can manage everything for you. Make sure you are comfortable in your final years. Manage everything." I knew what that meant. He wanted to drain me dry. He wanted to take the money I had earned sweating in construction sites for 50 years and gamble it away on his fake business deals. He thought I was just a slow old man with a bad leg. He didn't know that the limp came from falling off a rig while supervising the construction of the city's main suspension bridge. He didn't know that the mind behind these tired eyes could still calculate the load-bearing capacity of a steel beam in 3 seconds flat. I pulled away from his hand. "I can manage my own house, Brad," I said. "You worry about your own debts." "I hear the bank is calling again." Brad's face flushed red. "Who told you that? Did Maya talk to you? That girl needs to learn to keep her mouth shut. Don't speak about my daughter like that, I warned him." He laughed, a short, cruel bark. "I will speak how I want, Eli. You just worry about finding those papers. We will come by the house tomorrow to help you sort through Coretta's things. We don't want you hoarding a bunch of old junk." He turned and walked away, grabbing Maya by the arm and pulling her toward his car. I watched them go. My daughter looked back at me, her eyes wide with fear and apology. She was trapped. I had seen it for years, but I had never realized how deep the trap was until today. I stood there, alone by the grave. The wind picked up rustling the leaves of the oak trees. "Help you sort through her things," he had said. That meant he was coming to loot. He was coming to find whatever value he could wring out of my wife's legacy. I turned back to the grave. "I promise you, Coretta," I whispered, "he won't touch a single thing." I took a taxi home. The house felt enormous and empty without her. The silence was heavy, pressing against my eardrums. I walked through the rooms, touching the furniture she had polished, the curtains she had sewn. Every object held a memory. But I didn't have time for memories. I had work to do. Brad said he was coming tomorrow. That gave me 12 hours. I went into our bedroom. It smelled of lavender and rosewater, her scent. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her nightstand. Coretta was a private woman. She didn't talk much about her day. She went to church, she volunteered at the food bank, and she went to the bank every Tuesday. Every Tuesday. For 45 years. Why? We had direct deposit. We paid our bills online. I handled the major investments, though I kept the extent of our wealth hidden even from her, because I didn't want to burden her with the complexity of my shell companies. I gave her a generous allowance for the household. She never asked for more. So why the bank? I started searching. I didn't want to invade her privacy, but Brad's words had triggered an alarm in my head. He asked for more. I opened her jewelry box. Nothing but the costume jewelry she wore to church. The real diamonds I had bought her were locked in my private safe, which only I could open. I checked under the mattress. Nothing. Then I saw her old walking shoes in the corner of the closet, the comfortable white sneakers she wore when she went to run errands, the ones she wore on Tuesdays. I picked one up. It felt heavy. I reached inside. The insole was loose. I pulled it out. Underneath the foam padding was a small black notebook. It was old, the cover worn and cracked. I sat down and opened it. The handwriting was shaky in the later pages, but strong in the beginning. It wasn't a diary. It was a ledger. January 12th, 1979. Bank, $50. He said he would tell Eli. February 4th, 1985. Bank, $100. He is threatening to call the job site. March 10th, 1999. Bank, $500. He says he knows about Maya. April 5th, 2023. Bank, $2,000. Brad says the price has gone up. I froze. The name jumped off the page. Brad, my son-in-law. But the earlier dates, Brad was a child in 1979. He couldn't have been the one threatening her back then. I flipped through the pages, my heart hammering against my ribs. The entries were consistent. Every week or every month, a sum of money withdrawn and handed over. The amounts grew larger over the years. He said he would tell Eli. Tell me what? What secret could my wife possibly have had that was worth paying for over 45 years? What was she so afraid of that she let these parasites bleed her dry rather than speak to me? I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Not for the money. I had millions hidden away in offshore accounts and real estate holdings. The money didn't matter. It was the fear. My sweet, gentle Coretta had lived in terror for half a century. She had walked beside me, smiled at me, raised our daughter, all while carrying a burden so heavy it must have crushed her soul. And I never knew. I was the protector. I was the man who fixed things, and I had failed to fix the one thing that mattered. I closed the notebook. My hand was trembling with a rage so pure and hot it felt like lava. Brad. And before Brad, someone else. Someone connected to him. I needed to know more. I needed evidence. A notebook was just words. I needed the hard proof. I looked around the room. Where else would she hide things? Coretta was clever. She knew I respected her space. She knew I wouldn't rummage through her vanity. I walked over to her dressing table. It was an antique piece with a skirt of floral fabric around the legs. I sat on the floor. I lifted the fabric. Underneath, taped to the underside of the central drawer, was a small envelope. The tape was yellow and peeling. It had been there a long time. I pulled it loose. Inside was a single key. It was silver stamped with a number, 408, and the logo of the First National Bank downtown, a safety deposit box. She had a box I didn't know about, a box she visited every Tuesday. I gripped the key in my fist. The metal bit into my palm, grounding me. This key was the answer. This key was the map to the hell my wife had been living in. I stood up. I looked at the photo of Coretta on the dresser. She was smiling that shy, gentle smile I loved so much. "I am sorry, baby," I whispered to the empty room. "I am sorry I didn't see it. I am sorry I let them hurt you." I put the key in my pocket. I put the notebook in my inside jacket pocket right next to my heart. I walked to the window. It was getting dark. The streetlights were flickering on. Tomorrow, Brad was coming to take over my house. Tomorrow, he was coming to erase her memory. He thought he was walking into the home of a grieving, senile old man. He didn't know he was walking into a trap. I wasn't just an engineer. I was a man who knew how to bring a building down with a single well-placed charge. I looked at my reflection in the glass. The grief was still there, but it was hardening. It was turning into resolve. "I will find them, Coretta," I vowed. "I will find who started this. I will find who finished it. And I will make sure they never hurt anyone again." I turned away from the window. I had a long night ahead of me. I had to prepare the house. I had to hide my own assets. And I had to get ready for the bank. Tomorrow was Tuesday. And for the first time in 45 years, I was going to make the deposit. But this time, the currency wouldn't be cash. It would be vengeance. Tuesday morning arrived with the gray persistence of a headache that refuses to fade. The sky over the city was the color of wet concrete, a fitting backdrop for a man walking toward the scene of a 45-year-old crime. I dressed slowly, putting on my charcoal suit and the fedora Coretta had bought me for Easter 3 years ago. I grabbed my cane, the heavy oak one with the brass handle, not because I needed it to walk, but because I needed something solid to hold on to. My hands were steady, but my soul was vibrating with a frequency that felt like a bridge about to collapse under too much weight. I took a taxi to the First National Bank downtown. It was an old building with marble floors and high vaulted ceilings, the kind of place that was built to make you feel small and make your money feel safe. I walked through the revolving doors and the smell hit me instantly. It was the smell of money and dust and secrets. I wondered if Coretta had felt this same knot in her stomach every Tuesday for 4 decades. I wondered if she had paused at the door just like I was doing now, terrified of what was waiting inside, but more terrified of what would happen if she didn't show up. I walked to the front desk. The teller was a woman in her 60s with glasses on a chain and a face that had seen too many people pretending they weren't broke. She looked up at me and her expression softened into something like recognition. "Mr. Turner?" she asked, her voice gentle. I nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I am Elijah Turner." "I know," she said. "I was so sorry to hear about Coretta. She was a regular here. We all knew her." I gripped the handle of my cane. "Did you know why she came here, Mrs. Abernathy?" she supplied. "And no, Mr. Turner, we didn't know the specifics. Privacy laws, you understand. But we knew she was punctual, every Tuesday 10 a.m. sharp. She was the most disciplined woman I ever met." She paused, looking around to make sure her manager wasn't watching. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But I have to tell you, Mr. Turner, it broke my heart to see her. Why, I asked, my throat feeling like it was full of sand." "Because she always cried when she left," Mrs. Abernathy said. Not loud. She wasn't a woman to make a scene. But she would walk out those doors wiping her eyes every single week, for years. I offered her a tissue once and she just squeezed my hand and said she was praying. I thought maybe she was sick. Or maybe she was helping someone who was in trouble. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Crying. My wife, the woman who sang in the choir, who baked pies for the neighbors, who hummed while she ironed my shirts, had been walking out of this bank in tears for 45 years. And I never saw it. I never saw the red eyes. I never saw the stress fractures in her spirit. I was the chief engineer of the biggest construction firm in the state, and I couldn't see that the foundation of my own home was being eroded by fear. "Thank you, Mrs. Abernathy," I said, my voice raspy. "I need to access her safety deposit box. I have the key and the death certificate." She processed the paperwork in silence. Then she led me back to the vault. The heavy steel gate swung open with a groan. The wall of boxes looked like a mausoleum for secrets. Box 408. She unlocked her side, I unlocked mine. She pulled the long metal drawer out and carried it to a small private room. "Take your time, Mr. Turner," she said, closing the door. I was alone. The room was small, just a table and a chair. I sat down. The metal box sat in front of me cold and indifferent. I put my hand on the lid. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to walk away. Part of me wanted to keep the memory of my wife pure, to pretend she was just a sweet woman who loved church and gardening. But the engineer in me needed to know the root cause of the failure. I lifted the lid. I expected cash. I expected jewelry. I expected maybe letters from a lover, though I couldn't imagine Coretta betraying me like that. What I found was paper. Stacks and stacks of paper. They were bundled with rubber bands that had grown brittle and snapped when I touched them. I pulled out the first stack. They were carbon copies of cashier's checks and wire transfer receipts. I started to go through them. The dates went back to 1979. The amounts started small, $50, $75, $100. Back then, that was a lot of money for a young black couple trying to make it. That was grocery money. That was electric bill money. I did the math in my head as I flipped through the decades. The amounts grew. By the 90s, it was $500 a week. By the 2000s, it was $1,000. The last receipt, dated the Tuesday before she died, was for $2,000. I pulled out my phone and opened the calculator. I started punching in estimates based on the stacks. 50 weeks a year, 45 years. The number that stared back at me made me nauseous. $2 million. My wife had paid someone $2 million over the course of our marriage. Where did she get it? I knew the answer immediately. I gave her a generous household allowance. I gave her access to my accounts for expenses. I never checked the grocery bills. I never audited the household spending. I trusted her. She had been skimming. She had been living frugally, buying cheap cuts of meat, mending old clothes, denying herself every luxury so she could feed this beast. She hadn't been saving for a rainy day. She had been paying for protection from a hurricane. I looked at the recipient field on the receipts. In the early years, it was just a name written in hand. J.E. Management. Then later it became more formal. Blue Jay Holdings. Blue Jay. I picked up a receipt from 1985. It was a cashier's check. On the back of the carbon copy, there was a faint impression of a signature where the recipient had endorsed it. It was messy, a scrawl of someone arrogant, someone who didn't care about legibility. I held it up to the light. I squinted, adjusting my glasses. The loops of the letters were familiar. The way the capital B was formed, sharp and aggressive like a jagged tooth. I had seen that handwriting before. I had seen it on birthday cards sent to my daughter. I had seen it on loan applications I had silently rejected. It looked like the handwriting of a man I had known a long time ago, a man who was supposed to be a friend, a man whose son was now sleeping under my roof. I felt a rage so intense it made my vision blur. This wasn't just extortion. This was a parasitic infection that had been feeding on my family for generations. I pulled out my smartphone, the one my granddaughter Olivia said I was too old to use properly. I started taking pictures. I photographed every bundle. I photographed the names. I photographed the dates. I created a digital evidence trail that couldn't be burned or lost. I reached the bottom of the box. There was one last thing, a small envelope. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. It was old, black and white, cracked at the corners. It showed a young Coretta, maybe 18 years old, standing in front of a dilapidated house I didn't recognize. She wasn't smiling. She looked terrified. Standing behind her with a hand on her shoulder was a man. His face was in shadow, but his stance was possessive. I turned the photo over. On the back, in Coretta's neat handwriting, were 3 words: "He knows everything." I put the photo in my pocket. I put the receipts back in the box, but I kept the most recent ones. I needed the routing numbers. I needed the paper trail. I closed the box. I walked out of the room. I thanked Mrs. Abernathy with a nod, my voice too tight to speak. I walked out of the bank and into the blinding sunlight. The city noise washed over me, but I heard nothing but the blood rushing in my ears. $2 million. 45 years of tears. I walked to a bench and sat down. I needed to make a call. I dialed a number that I hadn't used in 10 years. Marcus Inc. Sterling answered on the 3rd ring. Inc. was 75 now, a retired police detective who ran a private investigation firm out of the back of a barber shop. He was the kind of man who knew where the bodies were buried because he had often held the shovel for the state. Eli Ink's voice was like gravel in a mixer. I heard about Coretta. I am sorry, brother. She didn't die of natural causes, Ink, I said into the phone. There was a silence. What do you mean, Eli? The obituary said heart failure. Her heart failed because it was carrying a load that would have broken a mule, I said. Listen to me, Ink. I need you to work. I need you to dig. Tell me. I found receipts, I said. Millions of dollars. 45 years of payments. She was being blackmailed, Ink. Bleeding out slowly since 1979. Jesus, Ink whispered. Who? The money went to a company called Blue Jay Holdings, I said. I need to know who owns it. I need to know who signs the checks. But I think I already know the last name. Who do you think it is? I think it is the same family that is currently eating my food and sleeping in my guest room, I said. I think I am raising a viper, Ink. You talking about Brad? I am talking about Brad's father, I said. And now Brad. I think the son inherited the sin. I will find them, Eli Ink said, his voice hardening. I will pull the corporate filings. I will follow the money. If Blue Jay Holdings exists, I will find the nest. Do it, I said. And Ink. Yeah. If you find out it is him, don't touch him. Do not touch him. Why not? Because he is mine, I said. I am going to take him apart piece by piece. I am going to make him wish he had never learned to write his name. I understand. I will call you tonight. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a moment watching the pigeons peck at crumbs on the sidewalk. They were fighting over scraps, unaware that a predator was watching. Brad thought he was the predator. He thought he was the clever wolf living among the sheep. He thought I was just a grieving old man, confused and weak, ready to be shorn. He didn't know that the sheep was actually a lion who had just woken up. I stood up. My leg hurt, but I didn't lean on the cane. I used it like a weapon, swinging it in rhythm with my steps. I was going home. I was going to look my son-in-law in the eye. I was going to watch him eat my food. I was going to watch him smile, that oily smile. And I was going to wait, because now I knew the game, and I had never lost a game in my life. I stood on the sidewalk looking at my own house, and for the first time in 40 years, I didn't recognize it. It wasn't because the paint had faded or the roof had sagged. It was because there was a moving truck parked in my driveway, a massive orange beast that blocked the afternoon sun, leaking oil onto the pavers I had laid with my own hands in 1985. The back gate of the truck was open like a hungry mouth, and two men I didn't know were marching into my front door carrying boxes. I gripped my cane until my knuckles ached. I had been gone for 3 hours. 3 hours to go to the bank, 3 hours to find out my wife had been bled dry for decades. And in that short span of time, my sanctuary had been invaded. I walked up the driveway. My leg was throbbing, a phantom pain from the accident years ago, but I forced myself to walk straight. I wasn't going to limp into this fight. The front door was wide open. The air conditioning I paid for was escaping into the heat. I stepped into the foyer, and the smell hit me first. It wasn't the smell of lavender and floor wax that Coretta had cultivated. It was the smell of cheap cologne and fast food. Brad was standing in the middle of the living room, pointing at the wall where my wedding portrait used to hang. Put the TV there, he was shouting at a mover, the 70-inch. And move that old sofa to the curb. It smells like old people. I cleared my throat. It was a deep rumble that used to make construction crews stop their jackhammers. Brad spun around. For a second he looked startled, a deer caught in the headlights. But then the mask slipped back into place. That oily smile that made my skin crawl spread across his face. Eli, he said, spreading his arms as if he were welcoming me to his home. You are back early. We wanted to surprise you. You surprised me, I said, my voice flat. Why is there a truck in my driveway, Brad? Why are you moving furniture? Maya stepped out of the kitchen. She looked tired, her eyes red, but she wouldn't look at me. She looked at her husband. She was waiting for him to tell her what the script was. We are moving in, Dad, she said, her voice barely a whisper. To take care of you, take care of me, I repeated. I didn't ask for care, Maya. I can cook my own meals. I can wash my own clothes. Brad stepped between us. He put a heavy hand on my shoulder. The disrespect of it made my blood boil. Now, Eli, let us be realistic, he said, his tone condescending and slow. You are 78. You just lost your wife. You are fragile. We couldn't live with ourselves if we left you alone in this big empty house. What if you fell? What if you forgot the stove? No. We discussed it. It is best if we are here. 24/7. He looked around the room with a possessive gleam in his eye. Besides, he added, we gave up our apartment lease. We made a sacrifice to be here for you. So we are going to need some space. Space. The word hung in the air. I looked toward the stairs. The door to the master bedroom, the room I had shared with Coretta for 40 years, was open. I saw a suitcase on the bed, a suitcase that didn't belong to me. Where am I sleeping, Brad? I asked quietly. Brad didn't even blink. Well, obviously Maya and I need the master suite, he said. We have a lot of things, Eli, and I need a workspace for my investments. You don't need all that room just for sleeping. We set up the guest room in the attic for you. It is cozy, quiet. You will like it. It has a nice view of the street. The attic. It wasn't a guest room. It was a converted storage space. It was hot in the summer, cold in the winter, and the stairs were steep. He wasn't giving me a room. He was putting me in storage. He was moving the old man out of the way so he could play king of the castle. I looked at Maya. You are letting him do this, I asked. You are kicking your father out of his own bed. Maya bit her lip. Daddy, it is just... Brad needs the space for his back. The mattress in the attic is new. It is better for you. She was lying. I could see it in the way she twisted her hands. She was repeating what he had told her to say. Fine, I said. Brad looked surprised. He had expected a fight. He had expected me to yell so he could tell everyone I was becoming aggressive. Fine, he repeated, suspicious. I am tired, I said, leaning heavily on my cane, letting my shoulders slump. I just want to rest. The grief. It is heavy, Brad. He relaxed. He smiled that shark smile again. Of course it is, Eli. You go on up. We will handle everything down here. Don't you worry about a thing. I walked to the stairs. I climbed them slowly, one by one, listening to the sounds of my home being colonized. I heard them laughing as soon as I was out of sight. I heard the sound of a beer can opening. I reached the attic. It was small. They had put a twin bed in the corner and a single chair. My clothes were piled in a box. It looked like a prison cell. I sat on the bed. I didn't unpack. I didn't cry. I sat there, and I listened. I listened to the movers dragging my furniture across the hardwood floors I had refinished myself. I listened to Brad barking orders. Then I heard a sound that made me stand up. It was the sound of the back door opening. And then a crash, like something hollow breaking on the concrete patio. I walked to the small dormer window and looked down into the backyard. Brad was there. He was carrying a box I recognized. It was Coretta's craft box, the one with her knitting needles, her yarn, the unfinished blanket she was making for the church raffle. He walked to the edge of the patio and dumped it. The yarn spilled out into the dirt. The needles clattered. Then he went back inside and came out with another box. This one held her porcelain figurines, the little angels she collected, the ones she dusted every Saturday morning humming gospel tunes. He threw the box. I heard the porcelain shatter. It was a sickening crunch. I felt a roar building in my chest, a sound so primal it frightened me. That wasn't trash. That was my life. That was the memory of the woman who had saved me. I turned and ran for the stairs. I forgot the limp. I forgot the act. I moved with the speed of a man who sees his house on fire. I burst out the back door. Brad was holding a painting. It was a watercolor Coretta had painted of the garden. It wasn't a masterpiece, but it was hers. "What are you doing?" I shouted. Brad jumped. He almost dropped the painting. He turned to look at me. He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed. "Jesus, Eli," he said. "You scared me. Go back inside. You are throwing away her things." I said, my voice shaking with rage. "You are destroying her things." "She is dead, Eli," he said callously, tossing the painting onto the pile of broken porcelain. "She doesn't need them, and neither do we. This is clutter. We need to modernize. We are clearing out the junk so we can breathe. Junk." He called my wife's soul junk. I stepped forward. I raised my cane. I wanted to strike him. I wanted to bring that heavy brass handle down across his smiling face and feel the bone give way. I wanted to hurt him the way he was hurting me. I saw the fear flash in his eyes. He raised his hands. "Whoa, easy, old man," he said, backing up. "Don't do something you will regret." And in that split second of hesitation, I saw the trap. If I hit him, he won. If I hit him, he would call the police. He would say I was violent. He would say I was dangerous. He would have the justification he needed to lock me away immediately. He wanted me to lose control. He was baiting me. I stopped. My arm was trembling, the cane held high. I looked at the broken angels in the dirt. I looked at the painting face down in the grass. Coretta wouldn't want me to go to jail. She would want me to win. I forced my muscles to unlock. It was the hardest physical thing I have ever done. I lowered the cane, but I couldn't just lower it. That would look suspicious. I had to sell the frailty. I let the cane slip from my fingers. It clattered onto the patio. I grabbed my chest with my left hand. I let my knees buckle. I collapsed onto the concrete, not hard enough to break a hip, but hard enough to look real. Eli Brad shouted, but he didn't move to help me. He just watched. I gasped for air. I shook my hands violently like a man having a tremor. I looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. My chest, I stammered. The water. I need water. Maya ran out the door. She had seen me fall. Daddy, she screamed. She pushed past Brad and knelt beside me. She grabbed my face. Daddy, breathe. Brad, get him water. Call 911. No, Brad said sharp and quick. No 911. He is just having a spell. Look, he is breathing. It is just panic. Get him water, Maya. Maya ran inside. I lay there on the cold concrete. I looked up at Brad. He was standing over me, looking down with a mixture of disgust and calculation. He wasn't worried about my heart. He was measuring me for a coffin. You are losing it, Eli, he whispered so low only I could hear. You are weak. Look at you. You can't even stand up. He nudged my leg with the toe of his expensive sneaker. Maya came back with a glass of water. Here, Daddy, drink this. Drink. I sat up, my hands shaking so bad the water sloshed over the rim, soaking my shirt. I brought the glass to my lips and then let it slip. It fell to the patio and shattered, joining the broken angels. I am sorry, I cried, burying my face in my hands. I am sorry. I am so clumsy. I am useless. Maya hugged me, crying into my shoulder. You are not useless, Daddy. You are just grieving. Brad watched us. A slow smile spread across his face. He thought he had broken me. He thought the lion had lost its teeth. Let us get him upstairs, he said to Maya. He needs to sleep. This excitement is too much for his heart. They helped me up. I leaned all my weight on them, dragging my feet, shuffling like a man of 90. As we walked back into the house past the pile of my wife's treasures rotting in the dirt, I made a promise. I promised every broken angel that I would make him pay. They put me in the attic bed. Maya pulled the blanket up to my chin. Sleep, Daddy, she said, kissing my forehead. She left the room, closing the door. I lay there in the dim light. I wasn't sleeping. I was waiting. I heard them in the hallway just outside the door. He is worse than I thought, Maya whispered. Did you see him shake? He couldn't even hold a glass. He is fading, babe, Brad said, his voice low and smooth. The stress is killing him. He won't last long, maybe a few months, maybe less if he has another episode like that. I heard the floorboards creak as he leaned in closer to her. And when he goes, Brad whispered, the house is ours. Do you know what this place is worth, Maya? I checked the comps. $3 million. The land alone is gold. We are going to be rich, babe. We just have to wait him out. I heard them walk away. $3 million. That was the price tag he put on my life. That was the value of 40 years of sweat and blood. He thought I was fading. He thought I was shaking from age. He didn't know I was shaking from the effort of holding back the storm. I threw the blanket off. I stood up. My legs were strong. My hands were steady. I walked to the window and looked down at the pile of trash in the yard. He wanted the house. He wanted the $3 million. He was going to get something else entirely. I reached under the mattress and pulled out the burner phone I had bought with cash after leaving the bank. I dialed a number. It is Eli, I said when Ink answered. Did you find the name, Ink asked. I found the motive, I said, my voice cold as the grave. He thinks I am dying, Ink. He is already counting the money. Do you want me to intervene? No, I said. I want you to find out everything about Blue Jay Holdings. I want to know where every cent of my wife's money went. And Ink? Yeah. Find out if Brad has a boss. Because a man that greedy usually owes money to someone scarier than him. I am on it. I hung up. I looked around the small attic room. It was a prison cell. But prisons have a way of hardening men. They had locked me in with my grief. They had made a mistake. They should have checked to see if the old man still had any fight left in him. They were about to find out that I had plenty. The park bench was cold against my legs, but the chill I felt had nothing to do with the autumn wind blowing off the lake. I sat there throwing pieces of dry bread to a flock of aggressive ducks, my hand trembling not from age but from a rage so profound it felt like magma moving beneath the earth. I had told Brad and Maya I was going for a walk to clear my head. Brad had laughed and told me not to get lost as if I were a toddler wandering off into traffic. He didn't know I was meeting a man who could find a needle in a haystack if the needle owed him money. Marcus Inc. Sterling sat down next to me. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I was. He just placed a thick manila envelope on the space between us. Inc. was 75, a former homicide detective who had been forced into retirement because he refused to look the other way when the city council wanted favors. He wore a fedora and a trench coat like he was still living in a noir film from the 50s, but his eyes were sharp as razor blades. "You aren't going to like this," Eli Inc. said, his voice sounding like tires on gravel. "In fact, you are going to wish you hadn't asked me to look. Tell me," I said, staring at the ducks. Inc. tapped the envelope. "Blue Jay Holdings isn't a hedge fund, Eli. It isn't an investment firm. It is a shell company. A ghost. It was incorporated in 1978, the year after I married Coretta." "Who owns it?" I asked. "The original incorporator was a man named Jay Evans," Inc. said. "He was a small-time loan shark and a fixer for the union. A bad guy, Eli. The kind of guy who smiled while he broke your fingers. He died 10 years ago. Evans." The name hung in the air heavy and suffocating. "My son-in-law's last name is Evans." Inc. nodded slowly. "I know. When Jay Evans died, the sole ownership of Blue Jay Holdings transferred to his only son, Bradley Evans, or as you know him, Brad." I closed my eyes. The world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just Brad. It was a legacy, a generational curse. My wife Coretta had been paying Jay Evans since 1978. And when Jay died, Brad didn't just inherit his father's watch or his car. He inherited the blackmail scheme. He inherited the victim. "He took over the family business," I whispered. "And the business was bleeding my wife." Inc. opened the envelope and pulled out a spreadsheet. I ran the numbers, Eli. The payments were consistent, monthly, like rent. But they went up every time you got a big contract. Every time you had a success, the price of silence went up. I looked at the numbers. They blurred through the tears I refused to shed. I thought about those years. I was a ghost engineer back then, a black man in a white man's industry. I designed the bridges, but I wasn't allowed to sign the blueprints. I solved the structural problems that stumped the Ivy League boys, but I had to do it from a back room. I made a fortune doing consulting work for firms that needed my brain but didn't want my face. Cash jobs, under-the-table bonuses. I gave every cent to Coretta. I told her to handle the accounts. I told her to save for our future. I thought she was building a nest egg. I thought she was buying freedom. Instead, she was buying safety. She was taking the money. I sweated for the money I endured, racism and disrespect to earn, and she was handing it over to the Evans family just to keep some terrible secret buried. "Brad knew," I said. "The whole time he has been living in my house, eating my food, calling me Dad, he has been cashing checks written in my wife's terror. He knew," Inc. confirmed. "And he got greedy. The payments spiked in the last 5 years. Right around the time he started his fake real estate business. He was using Coretta to fund his lifestyle. He was using your money to pretend he was a success." I felt a wave of nausea. I remembered the family dinners. I remembered Brad raising a glass to Coretta, calling her a saint. He was toasting the golden goose. He wasn't mourning her death. He was mourning the loss of his income stream. That is why he is so desperate, I realized aloud. Coretta is dead. The check stopped. The ATM broke. That is why he is trying to commit me. That is why he wants the power of attorney. He needs to find a new way to tap the vein. Inc. lit a cigarette, shielding the flame from the wind. There is more Eli. I looked into Brad's background. He isn't just broke. He is dangerous. He has gambling debts in Vegas. He has loans with people who don't use collection agencies. If he doesn't get control of your assets soon, he is a dead man walking. "Let him die," I said, my voice cold. "Let them break his legs. Them break his—" "He won't go down alone," Inc. warned. "He has your daughter. He has your house. And he has whatever leverage his father had on Coretta. That is the question, isn't it? I asked. What did they have on her? What could possibly be worth $2 million and 45 years of silence? Coretta was a Saint Inc. She went to church 3 times a week. She never drank. She never cursed. What could she have done? Ink blew a stream of smoke into the gray sky. Everyone has a shadow, Eli. Maybe it wasn't something she did. Maybe it was something that was done to her. Jay Evans was a monster. He specialized in shame. He found the one thing you were terrified the world would see, and he threatened to turn on the lights. I looked at the envelope. Inside were the receipts of my wife's torture. I need to know, Ink, I said. I need to know what the secret is. Because if I don't know, I can't protect myself. And I can't protect Maya. Ink nodded. I am digging. But Jay Evans was careful. He didn't write things down. He kept his leverage in his head. Brad knows, I said. Brad knows the secret. That is how he kept her paying after his old man died. He used the same knife. So what are you going to do? Ink asked. I am going to go home, I said. I am going to walk into that house, and I am going to look at that man. I am going to let him think he is winning. I am going to let him think I am a confused, senile old fool who is ripe for the picking. And then I am going to destroy him, I said. I am going to take everything he has. I am going to expose him. And when he is lying in the gutter with nothing left, I am going to lean down and whisper the name Blue Jay in his ear. Ink smiled, a grim, dark smile. Be careful, Eli. A desperate man is a dangerous man. I stood up. My knee popped, but I didn't wince. I am not a man anymore, Ink, I said. I am a reckoning. I left the park walking with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. The wind bit at my face, but I didn't feel it. I was numb. I thought about Coretta. I thought about her eyes, always a little sad, always a little fearful. I thought about the way she would flinch when the phone rang late at night. I had thought it was just nerves. I had thought she was fragile. She wasn't fragile. She was carrying the weight of the world. She was protecting me. She was protecting Maya. She had sacrificed her peace of mind every single day for 45 years to keep us safe from whatever poison the Evans family held in their hands. I got into a taxi. Take me to 742 Evergreen Terrace, I told the driver. That was my address. My home. Or it used to be. Now it was a battlefield. As we drove through the city, I watched the buildings pass by. I had helped build half of them. I knew the stress points. I knew how much weight a beam could hold before it snapped. Brad Evans had made a fatal miscalculation. He thought he was dealing with a weak structure. He thought he could just knock down the walls and take what he wanted. He didn't know that the foundation was made of reinforced concrete. I arrived at the house. The moving truck was gone, but the stain of his presence remained. His car was in the driveway, parked crooked like he owned the street. I walked to the front door. I took a deep breath. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face go slack. I summoned the confusion, the weakness, the fog. I opened the door. Brad was in the living room watching football on my television, his feet up on my coffee table. He was drinking a beer. He looked up when I entered. "Hey, Pops," he said, his voice dripping with false cheer. "Did you have a nice walk? We were starting to worry you got lost again." I looked at him. I looked at the son of the man who had tormented my wife. I looked at the parasite who was now trying to consume me. I forgot where the bread was," I mumbled, shuffling my feet. "The ducks. The ducks were hungry." Brad laughed. He took a swig of beer. "That is okay, Pops," he said. "Maya is making dinner. Why don't you go up to your room? We don't want you getting in the way." My room. The attic. The prison cell. "Okay, Brad," I whispered. "Okay." I walked toward the stairs. I felt his eyes on my back. He was laughing at me. He was counting his money. I reached the landing. I paused. I looked down at him. He was scratching his stomach completely at ease. "Enjoy the game, Brad," I thought. "Enjoy the beer, because winter is coming, and you have no idea how cold it is going to get." I went into the attic. I closed the door. I locked it. I pulled out the notebook. I pulled out the photos Ink had given me. I sat on the narrow bed and I began to plan. He had the secret. I had the truth. He had the leverage. I had the rage. And in the end, only one of us was going to be left standing in this house. I looked at the photo of Coretta I had hidden in my wallet. "Rest easy, my love," I whispered. "The bill is due, and I am going to collect it with interest." The morning sun streamed into the attic room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, but it brought no warmth to my bones. I sat on the edge of the twin bed, staring at the small plastic cup of pills Brad had left on the nightstand. There were 3 of them. 2 white, 1 blue. My blood pressure medication was supposed to be 2 small yellow tablets. I knew this because I had taken them every day for 10 years. I picked up the cup, my hand trembling slightly, not from age, but from a cold, calculating rage. Brad had come in earlier, his face a mask of exaggerated concern. "Here you go, Pops," he had said, his voice slick with false cheer. "Dr. Hill changed your prescription. He said these will help with the confusion. You've been forgetting things lately, remember. Yesterday you left the milk on the counter." I hadn't left the milk on the counter. I had put it back in the fridge just like I always did. But when I came downstairs later, it was sitting out sweating in the heat, and Maya was looking at me with pity in her eyes. It was a classic gaslighting technique. Move things, hide things, make the victim doubt their own sanity. I looked at the pills again. I was a structural engineer, but before I built bridges, I had studied chemical engineering. I knew my pharmacopoeia. I brought the blue pill up to my nose. It had a faint, chalky smell. I touched it to my tongue just for a second. Bitter. Metallic. It wasn't blood pressure medication. It was a sedative. A benzodiazepine, probably. Something to make me docile. Something to make me sleep. Something to make me stumble and slur my words so that when the social worker came, I would look exactly like the senile old man they claimed I was. And the white ones. I crushed one between my fingers. It crumbled too easily. Sugar pills. Placebos. He was taking away the medicine that kept my heart beating and replacing it with candy and poison. He wasn't just trying to control me, he was trying to kill me. I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me, a phantom echo of the drugs I had unknowingly ingested over the last few days. That explained the fog. That explained why I had felt so heavy so slow. He had been dosing me since they moved in. I stood up, my legs steady now that the rage had burned away the fog. I walked to the small bathroom attached to the attic. I flushed the pills down the toilet, watching them swirl away into the darkness. Then I reached into my shaving kit and pulled out a hidden stash. My real medication. I had refilled my prescription at a different pharmacy the day I went to the bank paying cash. I popped 2 yellow pills and swallowed them dry. I looked in the mirror. My eyes were clear. My hands were steady. "You think I am weak, Brad?" I whispered to my reflection. "You think I am a confused old man who needs a keeper?" I splashed cold water on my face. I ruffled my hair, making it look unkempt. I let my jaw go slack. I practiced the vacant stare of a man lost in his own mind. Showtime. I shuffled downstairs, my steps heavy and clumsy. I heard voices in the living room. "He is getting worse," Brad was saying, his voice low and serious. "I found him wandering in the hallway last night. He didn't know where he was. He thought he was back on the construction site. He was shouting orders at people who weren't there." I stopped on the landing, listening. I hadn't left my room last night. I had been reading Coretta's notebook, trying to decipher the codes. "He is dangerous," Brad continued. "What if he wanders outside? What if he walks into traffic? We can't watch him 24/7, Maya. We have lives. We have jobs. Well, I am looking for a job. We need professional help." Maya was crying softly. "I don't want to put him in a home, Brad. He built this house. He loves it here. It would kill him. It is killing us." "Maya." Brad snapped, his patience fraying. "Look at you. You are exhausted." "I am exhausted. We can't do this alone. There is a facility near the lake, Pinecrest. It is very nice. They have specialized care for people like him." Pinecrest. I knew that place. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. A place where they sedated the residents into a stupor and drained their bank accounts until they died. It was a death sentence. I stumbled into the living room, letting my cane clatter against the floor. "Coretta," I called out, my voice trembling. "Coretta, is that you? Did you make the pie?" Maya looked up, her face streaked with tears. "Daddy," she whispered. "Mom isn't here. Mom passed away. Remember." I looked around the room, feigning confusion. I blinked rapidly. "Passed away?" I repeated, my voice rising in panic. "No, No, she was just here. She was singing. Where is she? I started to pace, looking behind the furniture opening cupboards. Where did you hide her? Brad stood up. He pulled out his phone. I saw the red light of the video recording. He was filming me. He was documenting my episode. Eli, calm down, he said, his voice loud and authoritative for the camera. You are confused again. Coretta has been dead for weeks. You are having another episode. I turned on him. You hid her, I shouted, pointing a shaking finger. You stole her, just like you stole my tools. I lunged at him, not to hurt him, but to make the scene look real, to give him the footage he wanted. Daddy, stop! Maya screamed, jumping up to hold me back. Brad didn't move. He kept the phone steady, filming my outburst. See, Maya, he said to the camera, but looking at her. See how aggressive he is getting. He thinks I kidnapped his dead wife. This is Alzheimer's, Maya. Severe. We can't handle this. I let Maya guide me to the sofa. I collapsed, burying my face in my hands, sobbing. I want my wife, I wailed. I want to go home. You are home, Daddy, Maya said, stroking my back. You are home. I looked up at her, my eyes wet with fake tears but sharp with hidden intent. This isn't my home, I whispered. My home doesn't have strangers in it. Brad lowered the phone. He looked satisfied. He had his evidence. He had the clip that would convince a judge or a doctor that I was unfit. I think it is time to make the call, Maya, he said gently, for his own good. Maya nodded slowly, defeated. Maybe you are right, Brad smirked. He walked into the kitchen, presumably to call Pinecrest and start the paperwork. I stayed on the sofa, letting Maya comfort me. But my mind was racing. He was building a case. He was constructing a narrative of my decline. But narratives can be rewritten. That night, I waited until the house was silent. I waited until I heard the rhythmic snoring of Brad from the master bedroom, the sleep of a man with no conscience. I got up. I didn't shuffle. I moved with the silent grace of a hunter. I went to my bag, the one I had packed with my essential items from the attic. Hidden inside a pair of old socks were 6 small black boxes. Wireless micro cameras, motion activated, high definition. I had bought them online months ago for a security job I was consulting on, but I had never used them. Now they were going to be my eyes and ears. I crept through the house. I placed one in the living room, hidden in the bookshelf between 2 volumes of encyclopedias. I placed one in the kitchen on top of the cabinets pointing down at the stove and the counter where he prepared my medicine. I placed one in the hallway facing the master bedroom door. I went into the study which Brad had claimed as his office. I placed a camera under the desk pointing at his chair. I wanted to hear his phone calls. I wanted to see his paperwork. I moved with precision. I wore gloves to leave no prints. I was a ghost in my own home. I went back to the attic. I pulled out my laptop and synced the cameras. The feeds popped up on my screen one by one. Crystal clear. I saw the empty living room. I saw the dark kitchen. And then I saw movement on the kitchen camera. Brad walked in. He was wearing his boxers, scratching his stomach. He opened the fridge and drank milk from the carton. Then he walked over to the counter. He pulled a bottle of whiskey from the cupboard. He poured a glass. Then he pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. Hey, he said, his voice low but clear on my laptop speakers. Yeah, it is me. I got the video. It is perfect. He looks like a raving lunatic. Yeah. Maya is on board. She is crying, but she will sign. We will have him in Pinecrest by Friday. He took a sip of whiskey. He laughed. $3 million, man. Once he is declared incompetent, I get power of attorney over the estate. I can sell the house. I can access the accounts. We are going to be rich. And the best part. He paused, smiling at his reflection in the window. The old fool thinks I am helping him. He thinks I am the good son-in-law. He has no idea I am the one digging the hole. I watched him on the screen. I watched him toast his own cleverness. You are right, Brad, I whispered to the glowing monitor. I see you. I hit record. The file saved. Evidence 0001. He thought he was the director of this play. He thought he was writing the script. He didn't know that the cameras were rolling on him now. And unlike his shaky phone video, my footage wasn't going to a doctor. It was going to a judge. And then it was going to the police. I closed the laptop. I lay back on the bed. Friday. He said Friday. That gave me 3 days. 3 days to gather enough rope to hang him. 3 days to turn the tables. I closed my eyes. I didn't need the blue pills to sleep tonight. I had the comfort of knowing that the hunter was now the hunted. And he didn't even know he was bleeding. The attic room was silent except for the scratching of mice in the walls and the beating of my own heart, which felt too large for my chest. I sat on the narrow bed surrounded by the dusty boxes of my life. Brad and Maya were downstairs, probably sleeping or maybe planning my funeral. I didn't care. My world had narrowed down to the object resting on my lap. It was Coretta's Bible. It was a heavy, leather-bound King James version, the cover worn smooth by her hands over 50 years of prayer. She read it every night. She took it to church every Sunday. It was her shield and her comfort. But tonight, it felt different. When I had picked it up from the box of her things that Brad had tried to throw away, the book had fallen open. Not to Psalms, not to the Gospels. It fell open to the book of Job. And there, tucked between the thin pages of Scripture, was a blue envelope. I knew that envelope. It was the stationery she used for thank you notes and birthday cards. But this one was sealed with wax, a drop of red candle wax thumbed flat. On the front, in her shaky handwriting, were 2 words: for Eli. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. I wasn't opening a letter. I was opening a tomb. I pulled out 3 sheets of paper covered in her neat cursive script. The ink was smudged in places where tears had fallen decades ago. I adjusted my reading glasses. I took a breath that rattled in my lungs, and I began to read the last words my wife ever wrote to me. My dearest Elijah, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and the burden I have carried for 45 years is finally lifted from my shoulders. I pray that you can forgive me. I pray that you can understand why I did what I did. I never wanted to lie to you. I never wanted to keep secrets. But I loved you too much to lose you, and I loved our family too much to see it destroyed. I paused. The air in the attic felt thick. What could she have done? What could this woman who spent her life serving others possibly have to confess? I read on. You asked me once why I went to the bank every Tuesday. You thought I was saving. I wish I was. I was paying a debt, Eli. A debt that wasn't money, but silence. You remember the summer of 1978, the summer before we got married. You were working double shifts at the shipyard. I was working at the diner. One night, walking home, I stopped reading. My stomach lurched. I remembered that summer. I remembered how she had come home one night, her dress torn, her face bruised. She told me she had fallen. She told me she had been mugged, but they only took her purse. I wanted to call the police. She begged me not to. She said she just wanted to forget it. She said she just wanted to be safe with me. I believed her, because I loved her, because I wanted to protect her. I looked back at the letter. It wasn't a mugging Eli. It was a man from the neighborhood, a man named J. Evans. He didn't just take my purse, he took my dignity. He hurt me, Eli. In ways I cannot write down. J. Evans, Brad's father, the man who started Blue Jay Holdings, the man I had shaken hands with at my daughter's wedding. The bile rose in my throat. I swallowed it down. I had to finish. I found out I was pregnant 2 months later. The timing, it was too close. I didn't know if the baby was yours or his. I was terrified. I knew how proud you were. I knew how much you wanted a family. I was afraid that if you thought the child wasn't yours, you would leave me. Or worse, you would kill him and go to prison. I couldn't let you throw your life away for a sin you didn't commit. So I kept quiet. I prayed every night that the baby would look like you. But Jay Evans knew. He saw me. He did the math. He came to me the week before the wedding. He said he knew. He said he would tell you everything. He said he would tell the whole town that your bride was carrying another man's child unless I paid him. That was the first payment. $50. All I had. I dropped the letter. It fluttered to the floor, landing on the dusty rug. Maya, my beautiful, brilliant daughter. The girl I held in the delivery room. The girl whose scraped knees I bandaged. The woman I walked down the aisle. She wasn't mine. Biologically, she wasn't mine. I sat there paralyzed. The room spun. 45 years of fatherhood. 45 years of looking at her face and trying to see myself in her eyes. I thought about her smile. It wasn't my smile. I thought about her laugh. It wasn't my laugh. I closed my eyes and let the pain wash over me. It was a tidal wave. It threatened to drown me. It wasn't the pain of betrayal, it was the pain of sorrow. My wife had carried this alone. She had walked around with this secret burning a hole in her soul while I slept soundly beside her. She had paid a blackmailer every week for decades just to keep the illusion of my paternity intact. She protected me. She protected my pride. She protected my heart. I reached down and picked up the letter. There was more. When Maya was born, I looked at her and I knew I loved her. And when you held her, Eli, when I saw the tears in your eyes, I knew you were her father. Blood doesn't make a father. Love does. You raised her. You taught her. You are the only father she has ever known. But Jay Evans didn't care about love. He cared about money. He kept bleeding me. He said if I stopped paying, he would tell Maya. He would tell her she was a product of violence. He would break her heart. I couldn't let him do that, Eli. I couldn't let her know. When Jay died, I thought it was over. I thought I was free. But then Brad found his father's ledgers. He found the journals. He figured it out. Brad is worse than his father, Eli. Jay was a thug. Brad is a snake. He came to me the day he asked to marry Maya. He didn't ask for my blessing. He asked for a raise. He said he would marry her, he would keep the secret, but the price was going up. He said if I didn't pay, he would tell Maya on her wedding day that she was a bastard child. He used that word, Eli. He smiled when he said it. I crushed the paper in my fist. Brad, my son-in-law. He had married my daughter not because he loved her, but because she was the ultimate leverage. He had been blackmailing his own mother-in-law while sleeping next to her daughter. He had looked at his wife every morning not with love, but with the calculation of a man holding a winning lottery ticket. He knew Maya wasn't my biological daughter, and he knew that Coretta would do anything, pay anything to keep Maya from knowing the truth about her conception. That was why he was so confident. That was why he was so arrogant. He thought he held all the cards. He thought that even if I found out about the money, I wouldn't dare expose him because exposing him would mean exposing Maya's secret. He was banking on my silence. He was banking on my shame. I stood up. I walked to the small mirror on the wall. I looked at my face. It was the same face I had seen yesterday, the same wrinkles, the same gray beard. But something had changed in the eyes. I wasn't just an angry man anymore. I was a man who had just been given the key to the prison. They thought this secret made me weak. They thought that if I knew Maya wasn't my blood, I would reject her. They thought I would be broken by the truth. They didn't know me. I thought about Maya downstairs, sleeping in the room with that monster. I thought about every time she called me daddy. I thought about the time she made me a card for Father's Day out of macaroni. I thought about the way she held my hand when Coretta died. She was my daughter. Biology is just chemistry. Fatherhood is a job. It is a choice you make every single day. I had made that choice for 45 years, and a piece of paper wasn't going to change that. DNA didn't build the treehouse in the backyard. DNA didn't pay for college. DNA didn't sit up with her when she had the flu. I did. Brad thought this secret was a weapon. He thought he could hold it over my head. He was wrong. By revealing this, he hadn't broken my family. He had cemented it. He had shown me exactly what my wife had sacrificed to keep us together. He had shown me the depth of her love, and he had shown me the depth of his depravity. I looked at the letter again. He is threatening to tell her now, Eli. He says if I don't sign over the house, he will tell Maya everything. He says he will destroy her memory of me. I am tired, Eli. I am so tired. I don't know how much longer I can fight him. Please take care of our girl. Please forgive me. Love, Coretta. I folded the letter carefully. I put it back in the envelope. I put the envelope in my pocket next to the recorder. I wiped the tears from my face. They were hot and angry. Brad Evans had made a fatal mistake. He judged me by his own standards. He thought I cared about bloodlines. He thought I was a small man who would let pride destroy love. He didn't know that to a man like me, family isn't about who you are related to. It is about who you bleed for. And I was willing to bleed rivers for Maya, but I wasn't going to bleed alone. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark street. Brad, you used this truth to make money, I whispered to the glass. You used my wife's trauma to line your pockets. You used my daughter's innocence as a bargaining chip. I turned away from the window. I picked up my cane. You think this secret protects you. You think it is your shield, but I am going to turn it into a sword, and I am going to use it to cut you out of our lives like a cancer. I unlocked the door. I walked out of the attic. I walked down the stairs. The house was quiet. The enemy was sleeping. I went into the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water. I drank it slowly. Tomorrow was the dinner with the lawyer and the doctor, the dinner where they planned to certify my insanity. I was ready. I wasn't just fighting for my money anymore. I wasn't just fighting for my house. I was fighting for Coretta. I was fighting for the woman who suffered in silence so I could be a father. I would honor her sacrifice. I would protect our daughter, and I would bury Brad Evans so deep that not even the worms would find him. I went back to the attic. I sat on the bed. I didn't sleep. I waited for the sun. I waited for the battle. And for the first time since Coretta died, I didn't feel grief. I felt purpose. The dining room table was set with Coretta's fine china, the porcelain plates with the gold rim that she only brought out for Christmas and Easter. Seeing them now laid out for a feast of vultures made my stomach churn. I sat at the side of the table in a chair that was too low cushioned with 2 pillows, like I was a toddler who needed a booster seat. Brad sat at the head of the table. My seat. He sat there with the sprawling arrogance of a conqueror wearing a suit that looked expensive but fit him poorly around the shoulders. To his right sat Dr. Hill, the man who had sold his medical ethics for a quick payout. To his left was a man I hadn't met, but whose reputation preceded him. Mr. Silas Thorne. He was a lawyer known in the city not for his skill in the courtroom, but for his ability to make problems disappear for a price. He had the face of a ferret and eyes that constantly scanned the room, appraising the value of the furniture. Maya sat across from me. She looked small. She was picking at her napkin, her eyes red-rimmed and downcast. She knew what this dinner was. It wasn't a meal. It was a shearing. Beatrice bustled in from the kitchen carrying a tureen of lobster bisque. The steam rose up carrying the scent of cream and sherry. She placed it in the center of the table with a flourish. "Eat up, everyone," she said, her voice trilling with forced gaiety. "It is a special occasion. We are securing the future of the family tonight." She poured the soup. When she got to my bowl, she gave me a look, a sharp warning look. "Behave." I stared at the soup. I let my hand tremble, gripping the spoon with a fist like a child. I let a little drool escape the corner of my mouth. I saw Thorne look at me with distaste. "Is he always like this?" Thorne asked, not bothering to lower his voice. "He has good days and bad days," Brad said, slicing a piece of bread with aggressive precision. "Today is a bad day." He is confused. He thinks he is back in the 70s. Dr. Hill cleared his throat. "The cognitive decline is rapid, Mr. Thorne. As I noted in my affidavit, he requires 24-hour supervision. He is a danger to his own estate." I looked at Hill. I remembered the fear in his eyes when I confronted him in his office as the chairman. Now he looked confident again, bolstered by Brad's lies and Beatrice's cooking. He thought the old man in the coveralls was gone forever, replaced by this husk. I slurped my soup loudly, splashing it onto my chin. Brad sighed. "Maya, help him. He is making a mess." Maya reached over and wiped my chin with a napkin. Her hand was shaking. "I am sorry, Daddy," she whispered. "Don't be sorry, baby girl," I mumbled loud enough for them to hear. "The blue jay is hungry. He eats the worms." Brad froze. His knife screeched against the plate. He looked at me sharply. "What did you say, old man?" I looked at him with wide, vacant eyes. "The blue jay," I said. "He builds his nest in another bird's tree. He eats the eggs." Beatrice dropped her spoon. It clattered against the china. She stared at me, her face draining of color. She knew. She knew exactly what I was saying. Blue Jay Holdings, the blackmail, the secret. "He is rambling," Beatrice said quickly, her voice pitching up. "Just nonsense. Eat your soup, Otis." Thorne looked bored. He pulled a thick document from his briefcase and placed it on the table next to my soup bowl. "Let us get this over with," he said. "I have a tea time in the morning. This is the transfer of assets and the durable power of attorney. It gives Mr. Evans and Mrs. King full control over all accounts, property, and legal decisions." Brad smiled. He leaned toward me, pushing the paper closer. "Sign it, Pops," he said. His voice was sickly sweet, like rotting fruit. "Sign it so we can hold the money for you. We will keep it safe. You don't want the bad men to take it, do you?" I looked at the paper. The lines blurred, not because my eyes were bad, but because the rage behind them was hot enough to melt steel. I looked at Brad. I saw the greed in his eyes. I saw the fear behind it. He needed this money tonight. The Russians were waiting. I looked at Beatrice. I saw the guilt she had buried under layers of denial. I looked at Maya. I saw the daughter I loved, the daughter who wasn't mine by blood, but was mine in every way that mattered. I reached for the pen. My hand shook violently. I let the pen hover over the paper. Brad held his breath. Thorne tapped his watch. I moved my hand, but I didn't sign. I jerked my arm to the right. My elbow hit the soup bowl. It wasn't a splash. It was a wave. The thick orange bisque flew across the table. It coated the documents. It dripped off the edge, and it landed squarely in the lap of Mr. Silas Thorne. Thorne shouted, jumping up. His expensive suit was ruined, the hot soup soaked into his trousers. "You stupid old fool," he yelled, brushing frantically at his legs. "Look what you did." Brad slammed his fist on the table. "God damn it, Otis, can't you do one thing right?" I cowered in my chair, covering my face with my hands. "The birds," I wailed, my voice high and thin. "The birds are pecking me. The cuckoo bird put his egg in my nest. He wants me to feed it." The room went silent. Even Thorne stopped brushing his pants. Brad looked at me. His eyes narrowed. He heard it. Cuckoo bird, the bird that lays its eggs in other nests for other parents to raise. He looked at Maya, then he looked at Beatrice. Beatrice was staring at me, her hand over her mouth. She looked like she had seen a ghost. "What did you say?" Brad whispered. I peeked through my fingers. I gave him a look that was just for him. A flash of clarity in the fog. "The cuckoo," I whispered. "He thinks he is the king, but he is just a thief. And the gardener knows. The gardener knows about the $50. Beatrice let out a small choked sound. She grabbed her wine glass and downed it in one gulp. "He is hallucinating," she said, her voice trembling. "He is talking about the garden. He used to garden." Brad wasn't convinced. He looked at me with a new suspicion, a dawn of realization that maybe, just maybe, the old man wasn't as empty as he looked. Thorne gathered the soggy papers. "These are ruined," he snapped. "I have to draft new ones. This is going to cost you extra Evans. Just do it," Brad snapped, not taking his eyes off me. "Print them again. We are signing tonight." "I can't print them here," Thorne said. "I need my notary stamp." "It is in the car. And I need to change my pants." Thorne walked out, muttering curses. Maya stood up. "I am going to help him clean up," she said. She grabbed a towel and started wiping the table. She leaned close to me. "Daddy," she whispered. "What are you talking about?" "What birds?" I grabbed her hand. I squeezed it hard, harder than a weak old man should be able to. I looked her in the eye. "You are my daughter," I whispered. "No matter what the birds say, you are mine." She frowned, confused. "I know, Daddy." "Go upstairs," I said. "Don't come down." She looked at Brad, who was arguing with Beatrice in the corner. Then she looked at me. She nodded. She ran out of the room. I was alone with the wolves. Brad walked over to me. He grabbed the back of my chair and spun it around so I was facing him. "What do you know, old man?" he hissed. I looked at him blankly. I let my jaw drop. "I like soup," I said. Brad stared at me. He was looking for the spark he had seen a moment ago, but I had hidden it. I had buried it deep under the facade of the fool. "You are lucky you are crazy," he said, "because if I thought you were playing me, I would kill you right here." He turned to Beatrice. "Go get the backup copies," he ordered. "But Thorne left," Beatrice said. "We don't need Thorne," Brad said. "I will forge the notary seal. I will forge his signature if I have to. I am not waiting another day." The Russians called again, Beatrice. They gave me until midnight. Midnight. It was 8 o'clock. 4 hours. Beatrice ran to the study. Brad paced the room. He poured himself a drink. He looked at me with pure hatred. "You lived too long, Otis," he said. "You should have died with Coretta. It would have been cleaner." I sat there covered in imaginary shame watching him drink. He thought he was waiting for paperwork. He was waiting for the police. Because what he didn't know was that while I was spilling the soup, I had slipped the digital recorder into Thorne's briefcase. Thorne was a corrupt lawyer, but he wasn't suicidal. When he found that recorder, when he heard Brad threatening to forge signatures, when he heard the talk about the Russians, he would do the math. He would realize that Brad Evans was a liability. Thorne would turn on him. He would call the cops to save his own license. I just had to stay alive until they got here. Beatrice came back with the papers. "Here," she said. "Sign." Brad slammed the papers in front of me. He put a pen in my hand. He didn't ask this time. He grabbed my wrist. He forced the pen to the paper. "Sign it," he growled. I let him move my hand. I let him drag the pen across the line. The signature was a mess, a jagged scrawl that looked nothing like my name. "There," he said, releasing my hand. "Done." He picked up the paper. He looked at it. He smiled. "It is ours," he said. "The house, the land, the money. It is all ours." He looked at me. "Now get out of my chair." I stood up slowly. I picked up my cane. I walked to the window. I looked out at the street. I saw headlights, blue and red lights reflecting off the wet pavement. They weren't coming for me. Brad was pouring champagne. Beatrice was crying with relief. They were celebrating. They didn't hear the sirens yet, but I did. And it was the sweetest music I had ever heard. The car ride to the outskirts of town was silent except for the hum of the tires on the cracked asphalt and the radio playing a low, mindless pop song that Brad tapped his fingers to. I sat in the passenger seat looking out the window as the city gave way to strip malls, and then to desolate fields of dry grass and rusted chain-link fences. We were leaving the world of the living and entering the world of the forgotten. Brad had told me we were going for a drive to see a nice place, a place where I could make friends. He said it with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a smile that hid teeth sharpened by greed. We pulled into a gravel driveway. The sign out front was faded, the letters peeling off to reveal the plywood underneath. Golden Sunset Care Facility. It sounded like a resort. It looked like a minimum security prison. The building was a single-story block of gray concrete with small windows that looked like they hadn't been washed in a decade. There were no trees, there were no flowers. Just a patch of dirt where a lawn used to be, and a few plastic chairs scattered near the entrance where two old men sat staring at nothing. "Here we are, Dad," Brad said, turning off the engine. His voice was too loud, too cheerful. "Look at this place. Peaceful, right? Quiet. Just what you need." I didn't say anything. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I let my hand tremble as I reached for the door handle. I was playing the part. I was the confused old man, the burden, the problem that needed to be solved. But inside my chest, my heart was beating with the steady rhythm of a sledgehammer. I reached into my pocket and felt the small, cold metal of the digital recorder. I pressed the button. We got out of the car. The heat was oppressive. The air smelled of diesel fumes and something else, something sweet and rotting. It was the smell of neglect. Brad grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. He marched me toward the front door, not helping me walk, but dragging me. "Come on, Eli," he muttered, his cheerfulness evaporating the moment we were out of the car. "Pick up your feet. We don't have all day." We walked into the lobby. The air conditioning was broken or they were too cheap to run it. The air was thick and humid, smelling of industrial cleaner and boiled cabbage. The floor was linoleum scuffed and yellowed with age. A television in the corner blared a game show at top volume, but no one was watching. A woman sat behind a high counter behind a glass partition that looked like it was bulletproof. She was wearing scrubs that had seen better days, and she didn't look up when we walked in. She was scrolling on her phone, chewing gum with an open mouth. Brad walked up to the glass and tapped on it with his knuckles. "We are here to see Mr. Henderson," he said. "Brad Evans. I have an appointment." The woman looked up slowly. Her eyes slid over Brad, then landed on me. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and boredom. "Henderson is in the back," she said, pointing a thumb over her shoulder. "Just go through the double doors." Brad pulled me through the doors. We entered a long hallway lined with wheelchairs. Old people sat in them, slumped over, sleeping or muttering to themselves. A nurse walked past us, pushing a cart of medication. She didn't smile. She didn't say hello. She just pushed past, bumping my shoulder without an apology. "This is it," Brad said, leaning close to my ear. "This is your new home, Eli. Look at all the friends you are going to make." I looked at the residents. They looked drugged. They looked abandoned. They were waiting to die. Is this the hotel?" I asked, my voice quavering. "Is this where we are having lunch?" Brad laughed. It was a cruel sound. "No, Pops, this isn't a hotel. This is where you stay now. This is where you live." He stopped in front of a room. The door was open. Inside, there were two beds separated by a thin curtain. One bed was occupied by a man who was coughing, a wet, rattling sound that filled the small space. The other bed was empty, a bare mattress with a plastic cover. "This one is yours," Brad said, pointing to the empty bed. "Cozy, right? And look, it has a window." The window looked out onto a brick wall. But the house, I stammered. My house. Your house is gone, Brad hissed. We have to sell it, Eli. Do you know how much this place costs? It is expensive. Quality care isn't free. We have to sell the house just to pay for your first year here. He was lying. I knew the rates for places like this. They were warehouses for the indigent. They ran on state subsidies and cut corners on everything from food to medicine. He wasn't selling my house to pay for my care. He was selling my house to pay his gambling debts. He was dumping me in a hole so he could live in a palace. I looked at him. I looked at the greed in his eyes. I don't want to stay here, I whispered. It smells bad. You don't have a choice, Brad said, his voice dropping to a whisper. You are incompetent, Eli. You are a danger to yourself. The doctor signed the paper. The court signed the paper. You are property now, and I am putting you in storage. He leaned in closer. His breath was hot on my face. And don't worry about the cost, he said, a sneer curling his lip. You won't be here long. I give you 6 months, maybe less with the flu season coming up. Old men like you don't last long in places like this. They just fade away. 6 months. He had put a timeline on my life. He wasn't just abandoning me. He was sentencing me to death by neglect. I felt a surge of adrenaline. It took every ounce of my willpower not to drive my fist into his throat. I wanted to show him exactly how much life was left in this old man. But I held back. I needed more. I needed the money trail. Mr. Evans, a voice boomed from down the hall. We turned. A man was walking toward us. He was short, bald, and sweating in a cheap suit. He walked with a waddle, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. Mr. Henderson, Brad said, putting on his charming smile. Good to see you. Henderson didn't smile. He looked at me. He looked at my clothes, which were clean but simple. He looked at my cane. This is the admission, he asked. Yes, Brad said. This is Eli, my father-in-law. He is confused, very confused. We need to get him settled today. Henderson nodded. Come to my office. We have to sign the intake forms, and we need to handle the administrative fee. Administrative fee. The way he said it made my ears prick up. It wasn't a standard term. It sounded like code. Brad looked at me. Stay here, Eli, he said. Don't wander off. I have to go sign the papers so you can get your dinner. He turned to Henderson. I will be right there. I just need to use the restroom first. That drive was long. Henderson nodded. I will wait in my office. Third door on the left. Brad walked away toward the restroom, whistling. He thought he had won. He thought I was just a piece of luggage he could leave in the hall. I waited until the restroom door closed. I looked at Henderson. He was watching me, expecting me to drool or start shouting. I straightened my back. I lifted my chin. The confusion vanished from my eyes, replaced by the cold, hard stare of a man who had managed multi-million-dollar construction sites. Mr. Henderson, I said. My voice was deep, resonant, and completely lucid. Henderson jumped. He looked at me as if a statue had just spoken. Excuse me, he stammered. I walked toward him. I didn't use the cane. I walked with the heavy, purposeful stride of a foreman. We need to talk, I said. In your office. Now. Henderson looked at the restroom door, then back at me. He was confused. He was scared. He opened his office door and ushered me in. I walked in and sat down in the leather chair opposite his desk. The office was a mess of papers and files. It smelled of cigar smoke. Who are you? Henderson asked, sinking into his chair. Mr. Evans said you were senile. He said you didn't know your own name. Mr. Evans is a liar, I said calmly. And Mr. Evans is about to go to prison for fraud. The question is, Mr. Henderson, are you going to go with him? Henderson paled. What are you talking about? I am talking about the administrative fee, I said. I am talking about the kickback. Henderson froze. I have been in the construction business for 40 years, Mr. Henderson, I said. I know how contracts work, and I know how scams work. My son-in-law is broke. He has no money to pay for this facility. But he is dumping me here, which means he isn't paying you. You are paying him. It was a guess. A calculated guess based on the way Brad had smiled, the way Henderson had looked at him. There were referral schemes in the industry, shady operators who paid guardians to bring them patients so they could bill Medicare for services they never provided. They filled the beds, they billed the government, and they split the profit. Henderson started to sweat. He pulled at his collar. That is... "That is absurd," he sputtered. "We run a legitimate facility." I leaned forward. I picked up a paperweight from his desk. I turned it over in my hands. "I have a forensic accountant reviewing my son-in-law's finances." I lied, but it was a lie wrapped in truth. "He will find the transfer, Mr. Henderson. He will find the check you wrote him to bring me here. He will find the Medicare fraud." Henderson broke. He wasn't a hardened criminal. He was a bureaucrat with a mortgage. "It wasn't my idea," he whispered. "Yeah." He came to me. He said he had a wealthy father-in-law with a big insurance policy. He said if we took you in, if we kept you comfortable, he would split the insurance payout with us when you passed. He asked for an advance, $10,000. A finder's fee, he called it. $10,000. My life was worth $10,000 to my son-in-law. "Did you pay him?" I asked, my voice ice cold. "I gave him 5," Henderson admitted, looking at his hands. "I told him he gets the rest when the insurance clears." I felt a wave of nausea, but I pushed it down. I had him. I had the confession. I pulled the recorder from my pocket. I set it on the desk. "Mr. Henderson," I said, "you are going to do exactly what I say. If you do, you might keep your license. If you don't, I will burn this building down with you inside it, legally speaking." "What do you want?" he asked, trembling. "I want a copy of the check you gave him," I said. "I want the contract he signed. And when he comes back in here, I want you to tell him that everything is fine. I want you to tell him I am admitted. But you aren't staying." "No," I said, standing up. "I am not staying. But he needs to think I am. He needs to think he won. Because when he thinks he has won, he will get careless. And when he gets careless, I will bury him." Henderson nodded, scrambling to his file cabinet. He pulled out a check copy and a contract. He handed them to me, his hands shaking. I took them. I folded them and put them in my inside pocket. Brad walked in the door. He looked refreshed. He looked happy. "All set?" he asked, rubbing his hands together. Henderson looked at me. I gave him a slight nod. I let my face go slack again. I let my mouth hang open. I slumped in the chair. "Yes, Mr. Evans," Henderson said, his voice cracking slightly. "All set. He is admitted." "Great," Brad said. He walked over to me. He patted my cheek. "Well, Pops, this is it. Be a good boy. Don't cause trouble. I will visit you sometime." He turned to leave. He didn't look back. He walked out of the office, out of the building, and out of my life. He left me there in that office with the smell of smoke and betrayal. I stood up. I brushed off my suit. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," I said. "You have been very helpful." I walked out of the office. I walked past the nurse who had bumped me. I walked past the reception desk. I walked out the front door into the blinding sun. I didn't have a ride. Brad had taken the car. But I didn't care. I walked to the main road. I flagged down a passing truck. It was a construction truck, a flatbed hauling lumber. The driver, a young black man, slowed down when he saw me. "Need a lift, Pops?" he asked. I climbed into the cab. The smell of sawdust and sweat was like perfume after the nursing home. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Take me to the city," I said. "I have some business to attend to." I looked out the window as we drove away from the Golden Sunset Care Facility. I touched the pocket where the check copy was. Brad thought I was locked away. He thought I was dying. He didn't know that I was coming for him. And I was bringing hell with me. The silence in the house following Coretta's funeral was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a vault that has been sealed shut. For 45 years, my wife had been the engine that kept the machinery of this family running with her Tuesday bank visits and her quiet sacrifices. Now that she was gone, the gears were grinding to a halt and the noise of the breakdown was deafening if you knew how to listen. I sat in my armchair in the living room, a blanket draped over my legs, feigning sleep, but my eyes were cracked open just enough to watch the hallway. I knew what was happening. The flow of money had stopped. The blackmail payments that Coretta had been making to Brad and his father for decades had died with her. And now the parasite was starving. I could hear Brad pacing in the kitchen. It was a frantic, erratic rhythm. His expensive Italian loafers squeaked on the linoleum. He was on the phone. I didn't need a bug to hear him because he was shouting in a hushed, desperate whisper that carried through the thin walls of the old house. "I don't have it," he hissed. "The well ran dry. The old lady kicked the bucket before I could get the last installment. No, you don't understand. I need more time." I shifted slightly in my chair, listening. The voice on the other end of the line was obviously not accepting excuses. Brad's voice rose in panic. "Don't come here," he begged. "Please. My wife is here. Her father is here. Just give me a week. I have assets. I have the house. Yes, the big colonial. It is worth $3 million. I just need to liquidate it. I smiled internally, a cold, humorless expression. He was trying to sell a house he didn't own to pay a debt he shouldn't have incurred. He was desperate, and desperate men make mistakes. I heard him hang up the phone. Then I heard the sound of a drawer being ripped open. He was looking for something. He was looking for cash. He was looking for the stash Coretta used to keep. He walked out of the kitchen and headed for the stairs. He passed me without even glancing in my direction. To him, I was just a piece of furniture, a senile old man napping the day away. He didn't know I was the architect of his misery. I waited until he was upstairs, then I stood up. My knees popped, but I ignored the pain. I walked to the bottom of the stairs and listened. He was in my study. I heard the sound of books being thrown onto the floor. He was looking for the safe key. He wouldn't find it. I had moved the key days ago, and even if he had the key, he wouldn't find anything inside. I had cleared out the safe the day after the funeral, moving every cent of liquid cash and every piece of jewelry to a secure location that only Ink and I knew about. I heard a loud crash upstairs, followed by a string of curses. "Damn it!" he screamed. "Where is it? Where is the money?" He was unraveling. The walls were closing in on him. The gambling debts, the crypto losses, the Ponzi scheme payouts he owed, they were all coming due at once. He had built his life on the assumption that Coretta would always be there to pay the ransom. He hadn't planned for the day the goose stopped laying golden eggs. He came thundering down the stairs a few minutes later, his face red and sweaty. He looked wild. He saw me standing in the hallway, and for a second I thought he was going to hit me. "Where is it, Eli?" he demanded, grabbing my lapels. "Where is the money? Coretta always had cash. She had a stash. Where did she put it?" I looked at him with wide, confused eyes, playing the part I had perfected. "Money," I mumbled. Coretta went to the market. "She is buying flour." Brad shoved me away in disgust. "You useless old vegetable," he spat. "She is dead, Eli. She is dead, and she left us with nothing." He ran a hand through his hair, looking around the house with manic eyes. He needed liquidity. He needed it now. His eyes landed on Maya, who was just walking in from the garden carrying a basket of laundry. She looked tired, worn down by grief and by the constant tension radiating off her husband. "Maya," he said, his voice changing instantly from rage to a smooth, predatory sweetness. "Maya, baby, come here. We need to talk." Maya set the basket down. "What is it, Brad? You look sweaty. Are you okay?" "I am fine, honey," he lied. I am worried. About your dad. About us." He put his arm around her, guiding her toward the kitchen table. I shuffled after them, staying just far enough back to seem oblivious, but close enough to hear every word. "Sit down, Maya," Brad said, pulling out a chair for her. "Look, we need to make some hard decisions. Your mom is gone. Your dad is... well, look at him. He is gone too, mentally speaking." I leaned against the doorframe, picking at a loose thread on my sweater, watching them. "What do you mean?" Maya asked. "I mean, we can't keep this up," Brad said. "The medical bills are going to start piling up. This house costs a fortune to maintain. The taxes alone are going to bury us. And with your dad needing full-time care, we are drowning, Maya." "We are not drowning," Maya said. "Dad has his pension. The house is paid off." "It is not enough," Brad interrupted, pressing harder. "Listen to me. I spoke to the financial advisor. He said the only way to save the estate, the only way to make sure your dad gets the care he needs, is to liquidate the primary asset." Liquidation. That was the corporate word for selling my home out from under me. "You want to sell the house?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. "But this is Daddy's home. He built that porch. Mom planted those roses." "It is just wood and brick," Brad said, squeezing her hand. "It is an asset, and right now it is a distressed asset. We need to sell it. We can move your dad into a nice facility, something with doctors and nurses, and we can buy a smaller place. Use the difference to pay off, to invest, to secure our future." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a document. It was already folded, already prepared. He had been carrying it around, waiting for the right moment. "I had the lawyer draw this up," he said. "It is a standard listing agreement and a transfer of title. Since your mom died intestate, half the house goes to you. You just need to sign here to authorize the sale of your portion, and as your dad's primary caregiver, you can sign on his behalf for the rest." He handed her a pen. "Sign it, baby," he urged. "Do it for your dad. do it so he doesn't have to worry about money anymore. Maya looked at the paper. She looked at me standing in the doorway, looking lost and frail. She looked back at Brad. She trusted him. God help her, she still trusted him. She didn't see the sweat on his brow as fear of the loan sharks. She saw it as concern for the family. "Are you sure this is the only way?" she whispered. "It is the only way," Brad said. "Trust me." She picked up the pen. She lowered the tip to the paper. I felt a surge of adrenaline. If she signed that paper, it would create a legal nightmare. Brad would use it to borrow against the equity immediately. He would drain the value of the house before the ink was dry. I couldn't let her do it. I couldn't let him use her love for me as a weapon against us. I straightened up. I dropped the act. I dropped the slump in my shoulders. I dropped the confused vacancy in my eyes. I walked into the kitchen. I didn't shuffle. I walked with the heavy, purposeful stride of a man who had walked steel beams at 50 stories high. I walked right up to the table. Brad looked up, annoyed. "Go sit down, Eli," he snapped. "We are doing business." I didn't sit down. I reached out and grabbed the paper from under Maya's hand. Brad jumped up. "Hey, give that back." "You don't know what that is." "I know exactly what it is," I said. My voice was deep, clear, and resonant. It hadn't sounded like this in weeks. It was the voice of the foreman, the voice of the boss. Maya looked up at me, startled. "Daddy, you sound—" I looked at the document. Transfer of title. Quitclaim deed. He was trying to get her to sign a quitclaim, assuming she had ownership rights. I looked at Brad. He was staring at me, his mouth open. He realized something had changed. The old man wasn't trembling. "You think this house belongs to Maya?" I asked him, holding the paper up. "You think because my wife died, her share automatically transfers to her daughter?" Brad stammered. That is how the law works, Eli. Community property. Maya inherits her mother's half." I laughed. It was a dry, cold sound. "You should have done your research, Brad," I said. "You spent so much time counting my money, you forgot to check the records." I ripped the paper in half. The sound was loud in the quiet kitchen. Then I ripped it again, and again, until it was just confetti in my hands. I threw the pieces onto the table. "I bought this land in 1974, I said. 3 years before I met Coretta. 3 years before we got married." I leaned over the table, getting right in his face. "This is a premarital asset, Brad," I said. "I paid cash. The deed has one name on it. Elijah Turner. Not Elijah and Coretta. Just Elijah." Brad's face went white. But you were married for 45 years. "It doesn't matter," I said. "In this state, separate property remains separate unless it is commingled. And I never commingled the deed. Coretta lived here. She made it a home. But she didn't own it, which means Maya doesn't own it." I looked at my daughter. She was staring at me, eyes wide, shock replacing the grief. "Which means," I continued, turning back to Brad, "you are trying to sell a house that belongs 100% to me. And last time I checked, trying to sell property that isn't yours is called fraud." Brad backed away, knocking his chair over. You aren't senile," he whispered. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "No," I said, "I am not. I was just watching you. I was waiting to see how low you would go. And Brad, you hit the bottom of the barrel and started digging. You were faking it," he hissed, his fear turning to anger. "You tricked us." "I protected myself," I said. "You owe money, Brad," I said, my voice hard. "You owe a lot of money to some very bad people. That is why you are sweating. That is why you are trying to sell my house. You thought you could use my daughter as a pen to sign your check." Maya stood up. "Brad, is that true? Do you owe money?" Brad ignored her. He was looking at me with the eyes of a trapped animal. "I need that money, Eli," he said, his voice shaking. "They are going to hurt me. If I don't pay them by Friday—" "That sounds like a personal problem," I said. I pointed to the door. "Get out." Brad looked at the door. Then he looked at me. He looked at Maya. He realized his plan B had just evaporated. The house wasn't an asset. It was a fortress, and I held the only key. "You can't kick me out," he said. "I live here." "Not anymore," I said. "You are a guest, and the host is done entertaining." He looked at Maya pleadingly. "Maya, tell him. Tell him we are in this together." Maya looked at the torn papers on the table. She looked at her father, standing tall and strong. She looked at her husband, the man who had tried to trick her into selling her childhood home. She didn't say a word. She just stepped back, moving closer to me. Brad saw it. The shift in allegiance. He knew he had lost her. He let out a scream of frustration. He kicked the chair, sending it skidding across the floor. "You will regret this," he shouted. "Both of you. You think you are smart, Eli, but you are just a stubborn old man. You can't protect her forever." "I can try," I said. He stormed out of the kitchen. I heard the front door slam. The house was quiet again. Maya looked at me. "Daddy," she whispered. "You are okay." "I am okay, baby girl," I said. "I am back." She hugged me, burying her face in my chest. I held her tight. But I knew it wasn't over. Brad was desperate, and desperate men don't just walk away. He would come back. And when he did, he wouldn't bring papers. He would bring violence. I looked at the back door. I needed to change the locks. I needed to call Inc. The war had just moved from the shadows into the light, and I was ready for the fight. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight, but the house was far from asleep. The air was thick with a tension so dense it felt like the humidity before a hurricane. I stood at the top of the staircase looking down into the foyer. My leg was throbbing a dull ache that usually signaled rain, but tonight signaled danger. I had locked my bedroom door, but the wood was old and the lock was flimsy. It wouldn't stop a determined man, and Brad Evans was determined. He was determined, and he was drunk, and he was terrified. I could hear him pacing in the living room below. The heavy thud of his footsteps on the hardwood floor was erratic. He was muttering to himself, cursing the Russians, cursing the bank, cursing me. He had run out of options. The loan sharks had given him a deadline. The bank had foreclosed on the house he stole from my daughter. He had tried fraud, he had tried gaslighting, he had tried theft. None of it had worked. Now he was cornered. And a cornered rat doesn't think. It bites. I heard glass shatter. He had thrown something, probably another one of Coretta's figurines. He was destroying the house piece by piece, hoping to find money in the walls, or perhaps just trying to punish the structure for resisting him. I tightened the belt of my robe. I wasn't going to hide in my room like a frightened child. I had built skyscrapers. I had walked beams 60 stories in the air with the wind trying to knock me off. I wasn't afraid of a failed real estate agent in a cheap suit. I opened my door and stepped out onto the landing. "Brad." I called out, my voice steady. "Go to sleep. You are drunk." The pacing stopped. Silence filled the house for a heartbeat. Then Brad appeared at the bottom of the stairs. He looked disheveled. His shirt was unbuttoned, his tie hanging loose around his neck like a noose. His eyes were bloodshot and wild. He held a half-empty bottle of scotch in one hand. "Sleep." He laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You want me to sleep? How can I sleep knowing you are sitting on a mountain of cash while I am drowning, you selfish old man? You have millions hidden away. I know you do." "I have nothing for you, Brad," I said, gripping the banister. He started up the stairs. He moved slowly, heavily. He swayed slightly, but his eyes were locked on me with a murderous intensity. "You think you are better than me?" he sneered, taking the first step. "You think because you worked with your hands you are some kind of saint. You are just a miser. You let your wife pinch pennies while you hoarded wealth. You are letting your daughter lose her home." "I am teaching my daughter to survive," I said, something her husband never learned. He stopped on the third step, his face twisted in rage. "Don't you talk to me about survival," he shouted. "I am surviving. I am doing what I have to do. You are the one standing in the way. You are the obstacle." He took another step, then another. He was halfway up the stairs now. I watched him come. I calculated the distance. I calculated the angles. I was 78 years old. I wasn't as fast as I used to be. I wasn't as strong. But I knew physics, and I knew gravity. Maya came out of the guest room down the hall. She was wearing her nightgown, her hair messy from sleep. She saw Brad on the stairs. She saw the look on his face. "Brad, stop," she cried. "What are you doing? Go downstairs." "Shut up, Maya," he yelled without looking back at her. "Go back to bed. This is between me and the bank manager." "I am not a bank, Brad," I said. "I am your father-in-law." "You are a dead weight," he hissed. "You are a useless antique taking up space." He reached the top of the stairs. He was breathing hard, smelling of liquor and sweat. He stood right in front of me, towering over me. He was younger. He was bigger. He thought he had the power. Sign the papers, he said, holding out a hand. Not the papers I tore up, new ones. He pulled a crumpled document from his back pocket. Transfer the land, now, or I swear to God I will burn this house down with you in it. No, I said. He stared at me. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that after everything, after the threats, after the fear, I was still saying no. He snapped. The bottle of scotch dropped from his hand. It bounced on the carpeted landing with a dull thud, spilling amber liquid everywhere. He lunged at me. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't try to choke me. He just shoved. He put both hands on my chest and he pushed with all his strength. It happened in slow motion. I felt his hands hit my sternum. I felt my center of gravity shift backward. I felt my feet leave the floor. I was falling. For most people, falling backward down a flight of oak stairs is a death sentence. You tense up, you hit your head, you break your neck. But I had spent 40 years on construction sites. I had taken safety courses on how to fall. I had slipped on scaffolding and walked away. The instinct took over. It wasn't conscious thought. It was muscle memory. Chin to chest. Protect the head. Relax the limbs. I didn't fight the fall. I went limp. I tucked my chin down, locking my jaw shut so I wouldn't bite my tongue. I pulled my arms in, protecting my ribs. I hit the first step with my shoulder. The impact was hard, jarring the breath out of me. I tumbled. The world was a blur of wood and wall and light. My hip struck the railing. My knee banged against a riser. I rolled. I didn't try to stop. Trying to stop is what breaks bones. You have to ride the momentum. Thud, thud, thud. I hit the bottom of the stairs. I landed on my side on the foyer rug, my arm twisted under me, my legs splayed out. The pain was immediate and sharp. My shoulder screamed, my hip felt like it was on fire. My head was throbbing where it had grazed the banister. But I was conscious. I could feel my toes, I could feel my fingers. Nothing was broken, I was bruised, I was battered, but I wasn't broken. I lay there. I didn't move, I didn't groan. I let my eyes roll back slightly and then closed them, leaving just a slit of vision. I let my breathing go shallow. I heard Maya scream. It was a blood-curdling sound, a shriek of pure terror. "Daddy!" I heard her running to the top of the stairs. I heard her fall to her knees. "You killed him!" she screamed. "You killed him, Brad!" I watched through my eyelashes. Brad was standing at the top of the stairs looking down at me. He wasn't horrified. He wasn't rushing down to check my pulse. He was panting, his chest heaving. He looked relieved. "He fell," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. He slipped. He was old. He lost his balance. "You pushed him!" Maya yelled. "I saw you! You pushed him!" "He was in my face," Brad shouted back. "He was threatening me. It was self-defense. Self-defense." He is 78 years old. Brad walked down the stairs, stepping over the spilled scotch. He walked slowly, deliberately. He reached the bottom and stood over me. He nudged my leg with his foot. I didn't react. I lay stone still. "He is out cold," Brad said. "Is he breathing?" Maya asked, sobbing as she ran down the stairs. She threw herself onto my chest. "Daddy! Daddy, wake up!" Brad grabbed her shoulder and pulled her back. "Don't touch him. You might make it worse. Call 911. Maya screamed, struggling against his grip. "Call an ambulance." Brad didn't move. He looked at me. He looked at the stillness of my chest. "Wait a minute," he said. "What call them? Just wait," Brad said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Look at him, Maya. He is old. He is hurt bad. Even if they save him, what kind of life is he going to have? A vegetable, a burden." Maya stopped struggling. She stared at her husband with horror. "What are you saying?" "I am saying, maybe it is better this way," Brad said. "Maybe it is a blessing. If he dies, the problems go away, the debts go away, the house is ours, the insurance pays out." He looked at my face. He looked right into my eyes that he thought were closed. "Let him go, Maya," he whispered. "Just wait 10 minutes. Then we call. We say we found him like this. We say he fell while we were sleeping. No one will know. The old man fell," he said softly, almost to himself. "If he dies, even better." I felt Maya freeze. I felt her hand trembling on my arm. She was looking at the man she married. She was hearing him propose murder by omission. She was seeing the monster without the mask. This was the moment. This was the test. "No." Maya whispered. "No." She ripped herself away from him. She grabbed her phone from her pocket. Her fingers flew across the screen. "What are you doing?" Brad snapped, lunging for her. "I am calling the police," she screamed. "Get away from me. You are a murderer." She hit the call button. She put the phone to her ear, backing away toward the door, putting distance between herself and him. 911. "Yes. My father. He fell down the stairs. He is unconscious. Please hurry." My husband pushed him. Brad cursed. He ran a hand through his hair. He looked at me again. He kicked my leg hard. "You stubborn old bastard," he hissed. "Why don't you just die?" I lay there, absorbing the pain, absorbing the hate. I let the camera in the hallway, the tiny lens hidden in the smoke detector above the foyer, record every second of it. It recorded the push. It recorded the fall. It recorded the delay. And it recorded the words, "If he dies, even better." I heard sirens in the distance. They were coming fast. Maya must have sounded terrified. Brad heard them too. His demeanor changed instantly. The panic set in. He looked around the foyer. He saw the spilled scotch at the top of the stairs. He saw his disheveled clothes. He dropped to his knees beside me. He grabbed my hand. He started squeezing it. "Otis," he shouted loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Otis, stay with us. Oh God, Maya, get a cold compress. Stay with us, Pop." He started fake crying. He started rocking back and forth, holding my hand to his forehead. "Don't you die on me," he sobbed. "I can't lose you too." I felt his tears dripping onto my hand. They were hot and wet and fake. He was performing. He was setting the stage for the paramedics. He was the grieving son-in-law, the hero who tried to save the clumsy old man. Maya stood by the door watching him. She wasn't crying anymore. She was staring at him with a look of absolute revulsion. She saw the performance. She knew the truth. The front door burst open. EMTs rushed in carrying bags and a stretcher. Police officers followed. "What happened?" the lead paramedic asked, kneeling beside me. "He fell," Brad sobbed, pointing up the stairs. "He slipped. I tried to catch him, but he was too heavy. He tumbled all the way down." "Is he breathing? Please save him." The paramedic checked my pulse. He shone a light in my eyes. I let my pupils dilate. I let out a low moan. "He is alive," the paramedic said. "Let's get a collar on him. Backboard, move." They worked quickly. They strapped me down. They lifted me up. As they wheeled me out, I opened my eyes just a crack. I looked at Brad. He was wiping his eyes with his sleeve, looking at the police officer, looking like a devastated family member. "It was an accident, officer," he was saying. "A terrible accident." I closed my eyes again. It wasn't an accident. It was a felony. And the camera saw everything. I was going to the hospital. I was going to get checked out. I was going to be sore for weeks. But Brad Evans was going to prison. As they loaded me into the ambulance, I allowed myself a small internal smile. He thought he had pushed me to my death. He had just pushed me into the perfect position to destroy him. The antiseptic smell of the hospital room was thick enough to taste a chemical tang that sat heavy on the back of my tongue. I lay in the narrow bed, my eyes closed, listening to the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. It was a slow, steady tempo that betrayed nothing of the adrenaline coursing through my veins. My ribs ached from the fall down the stairs, a dull, throbbing reminder of my son-in-law's shove. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the cold clarity of my mind. I knew exactly where I was, and I knew exactly who was standing over me. The door clicked shut. I heard the heavy footsteps of a man walking toward the bed. It wasn't a nurse. Nurses moved with efficiency. This man moved with hesitation. I recognized the gait. It was Dr. Ellis. I had met Dr. Ellis once before at a barbecue Brad hosted 3 years ago. He was a man with a weak chin and expensive tastes, a dangerous combination in the medical profession. Brad had introduced him as his golf buddy, a man who knew how to have a good time. Now he was my attending physician. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a hit job. I kept my breathing shallow. I let my hand rest limp on the sheet. "He is out cold," Brad said, his voice coming from the corner of the room. The fall scrambled him pretty good. The paramedics said he was unresponsive. "Good," Ellis replied. His voice was nervous, a little too high. "That makes this easier. We can say it was a subdural hematoma, a delayed reaction to the head trauma. It happens all the time with the elderly. Their brains, they are fragile. Just make sure he doesn't wake up," Brad hissed. "He knows things, Ellis. He knows about the money. He knows about the house. If he talks, I am finished. And if I am finished, you don't get the rest of your payment." "Don't worry," Ellis said. I have a cocktail here that will put him into a deep sleep, a medically induced coma to allow the brain to heal. If his heart gives out under the strain, well, he is 78. No one will ask questions. I heard the clink of glass against glass. He was preparing the syringe. Go wait in the lobby, Brad Ellis said. You don't want to see this. It takes a few minutes. Brad didn't argue. I heard the door open and close. I was alone with the executioner. I felt Ellis approach the bed. I felt his hand on my arm searching for the IV port. His fingers were cold and clammy. He was sweating. He knew what he was doing was murder, but he was too greedy to stop. He swabbed the port with alcohol. I felt the pressure of the needle tip against the plastic valve. Now! My eyes snapped open. Ellis gasped. He tried to pull back, but I was faster. My left hand, the one that wasn't attached to the IV, shot out and grabbed his wrist. I didn't grip him like a sick old man. I gripped him with the strength of a man who had spent 40 years pulling steel cables and hammering iron. My fingers dug into his tendons, pinning his hand to the bed rail. The syringe fell from his other hand and clattered onto the floor. Ellis stared at me, his eyes wide with terror. He tried to pull away, but I held him fast. "Mr. King," he stammered, You are awake. I am wide awake." "Doctor," I whispered. My voice was a low growl, a sound that came from the bottom of a gravel pit. "Please let go," he said. I was just giving you a sedative, for the pain." "Don't lie to me, boy," I said, tightening my grip until I felt the bones in his wrist grind together. "I heard you. I heard every word. You and Brad." He went pale. I don't know what you are talking about." "I know about the $50,000, I said. He froze. "I know Brad paid you $50,000 to make sure I didn't walk out of here." I continued, my eyes locking onto his. "I know about his gambling debts. And I know that you have a malpractice suit pending in civil court that you are desperate to settle." How do you know that?" he whispered. "Because I make it my business to know the weaknesses of the men who try to kill me," I said. I pulled him closer until his face was inches from mine. "Listen to me very carefully, doctor. There is a camera in this room." He looked up at the ceiling, panicked. "Not up there," I said. "On me." I tapped the button on my shirt collar with my free hand. It was a button camera, a tiny lens disguised as plastic. "I have been recording for 10 minutes. I lied. But it was a lie built on a foundation of fear, and fear is the best mortar. I have you conspiring to commit murder. I have you discussing the payment." Ellis started to shake. "Please, Mr. King." He forced me. He said he would ruin me. "He can't ruin you," I said. "But I can. I can take your license. I can take your freedom. I can make sure you die in a prison cell where the only medicine you practice is mopping the floor." "What do you want?" he begged, tears forming in his eyes. I released his wrist. He stumbled back, rubbing the red marks on his skin. "Get out," I said. "Get out of this room. Go to the nurse's station and sign my discharge papers. Mark it as left against medical advice if you have to. But get me out of here. Now." "But your injuries." "My injuries are bruises," I said, sitting up. "I know how to fall. Now go, before I send this video to the medical board." He scrambled for the door, picking up the syringe with a shaking hand and shoving it into his pocket. He didn't look back. I sat on the edge of the bed. My head spun for a moment, the room tilting. I was hurt. My hip was on fire, my shoulder throbbed. But pain was just information. It told you were alive. I reached for my clothes, which had been folded on the chair. I dressed slowly, wincing as I pulled my shirt over my head. I put on my fedora. I grabbed my cane. Then I took out my phone. I dialed a number that wasn't in my contacts list, a number I had memorized 30 years ago. "Atticus," I said when he answered. "Otis. Where are you?" "I am at Mercy Hospital," I said. Brad tried to finish the job. "Are you safe?" Atticus asked, his voice instantly shifting from lawyer to consigliere. "For the moment, but I am leaving. I need you to activate the protocol." "Which one?" "The Black Fund," I said. There was a silence on the line. The Black Fund was my nuclear option. It was a series of offshore accounts and shell companies I had set up in the 80s designed for one purpose: war. It funded my private security, my legal attack dogs, and my emergency contingencies. It was money that didn't exist on any tax return, money that could buy an army if I needed one. "I am going home, Atticus," I said. "But I am not going back as a victim. I am going back as an occupier." "I understand," Atticus said. "I will have the team there in 20 minutes. Who do you want?" Send insertion team Alpha, I said, and tell them to bring the perimeter gear. I want my house locked down tighter than Fort Knox. And Atticus, yes, start the foreclosure on Brad's office building. And call the bank that holds the note on his car. I want him stripped naked. Consider it done. I hung up. I walked to the door. I opened it and stepped into the hallway. Brad was sitting in the waiting room at the end of the hall. He was drinking a coffee, looking at his phone. He looked relaxed. He thought the problem was being solved in room 304. I walked toward him. The cane clicked rhythmically on the linoleum floor. Click, click, click. He looked up. The coffee cup slipped from his hand. It hit the floor and exploded, sending hot brown liquid splashing across his shoes. "Dad," he whispered. I didn't stop. I walked right up to him. I towered over him. "You look surprised, Brad," I said. I thought you were sleeping," he stammered, standing up, backing away. Dr. Ellis said. Dr. Ellis had a change of heart, I said. He decided that murder wasn't in his Hippocratic oath today. Brad looked at the door to my room, then back at me. He realized the plan had failed. He realized the monster was out of the box. "Dad, listen. Don't speak," I said, my voice low and hard. "Don't ever call me Dad again. You forfeited that right when you pushed me down the stairs. I didn't push you. It was an accident." "Save it for the jury," I said. I walked past him toward the elevators. "Where are you going?" he called out, his voice shrill with panic. "You can't leave. You are hurt. You need help." "I don't need your help, Brad," I said, pressing the down button. "I have my own." The elevator doors opened. 2 men stepped out. They were huge, wearing dark suits and earpieces. They weren't hospital security. They were my men. They saw me and nodded. "Mr. King," one of them said. "The car is waiting." Brad stared at them. "Who are they?" "They are the reason you are never going to touch me again," I said. I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed on Brad's terrified face. We rode down in silence. The pain in my hip was a dull roar, but I stood straight. We walked out of the hospital entrance. A black armored SUV was waiting at the curb. It wasn't a luxury car. It was a tank disguised as a Suburban. I climbed into the back seat. The leather was cool. The tinted windows blocked out the world. "Take me home," I said to the driver. We drove through the city. I watched the streets pass by, the familiar corners, the buildings I had built. It was my city, and I wasn't going to let a 2-bit con man run me out of it. We pulled into my driveway. The house looked the same, but it felt different. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a fortress. My security team fanned out. They checked the perimeter. They checked the windows. They swept the house for bugs. I walked into the foyer. I looked at the stairs where I had fallen. I looked at the stain of spilled scotch on the carpet. I wasn't afraid. I felt a cold, clean anger. Maya was in the kitchen. She jumped when I walked in. "Daddy," she cried, running to me. "Brad said you were in a coma. He said you were dying." "Brad is a liar, honey," I said, hugging her. "Brad is a lot of things." She looked at the security guards standing by the door. "Who are they?" "They are friends," I said. I sat her down at the table. It was time. I couldn't protect her from the truth anymore. The truth was the only thing that could save her. "Maya," I said, taking her hands, "we need to talk. About Brad, about your mother, and about you." She looked at me, her eyes wide and fearful. "What about me, Daddy?" I took a deep breath. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope with the photos and the receipts. "Everything," I said. "I am going to tell you everything." And as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor, I began to dismantle her world so that I could build a better one in its place. The study door clicked shut with the heavy finality of a bank vault ceiling, and for the first time in hours, the noise of the outside world was cut off. The sirens, the shouting, the chaos of the warehouse all faded into the hum of the high-end air filtration system I had installed years ago. Outside the heavy oak door, 2 of my security team stood guard. Their arms crossed, their faces impassive. Inside, it was just me and Maya. She sat in the leather armchair across from my desk, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. She was 30 years old, a grown woman who had navigated marriage and a career, but right now she looked like a frightened little girl waiting for a scolding. Her hands were trembling in her lap, still stained with the dust of the warehouse floor where she had fought for my life. Her eyes were wide and red-rimmed, fixed on me with a mixture of confusion and terrified adoration. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Who are those men outside? Why are we locked in here? Is Brad gone forever?" I walked around the desk and sat down heavily. My hip was throbbing a dull ache that reminded me I was 78 years old, but my mind was as sharp as a diamond cutter. I looked at my daughter. I looked at the face I had loved since the moment I saw it in the hospital delivery room. "Brad is in a cell, Maya," I said, my voice low and steady. "And he is going to stay there. But we need to talk about why. We need to talk about the things he knew, the things he used to hurt us." Maya frowned. "He wanted the money, Daddy." "We know that. He wanted the land. It wasn't just the land, baby girl," I said. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the envelope. The blue envelope with the wax seal broken. Coretta's letter. I placed it on the desk between us. Next to it I placed the stack of receipts from the safety deposit box. The paper trail of a 45-year extortion. "Your mother didn't die of a heart attack," I said. Her heart stopped. Yes. But it stopped because it was tired. It was tired of carrying a secret that weighed more than this house. Maya reached out and touched the receipts. "What are these?" she asked. "These are payments," I said. "Payments your mother made every Tuesday for 45 years. $2 million, Maya. She paid $2 million to the Evans family. First to Jay Evans, Brad's father. And then when Jay died, to Brad." Maya stared at me. $2 million. But Mom didn't have money. She clipped coupons. She sewed her own clothes. She had money because I gave it to her," I said. "I thought she was saving it. I thought she was building a nest egg. Instead, she was paying a ransom." Ransom for what? Maya whispered. What could Mom possibly have done? I took a deep breath. This was the hardest part. This was the moment that could break us or save us. I looked into her eyes, searching for the strength I knew was in there, the strength she had shown in the warehouse. "She was paying them to keep a secret, Maya," I said. "A secret about you. About me." I nodded. I opened the letter. I didn't read it to her. I couldn't bring myself to say the words out loud again. I pushed it across the desk. "Read it," I said. Maya picked up the letter. Her hands shook so hard the paper rattled. I watched her eyes scan the page. I saw the moment she reached the paragraph about the summer of 1978. I saw her breath catch. I saw her face drain of all color, leaving her skin gray and ashen. She read about the assault. She read about the pregnancy. She read about the fear. And then she read the sentence that changed her identity. "I didn't know if the baby was yours or his." Maya dropped the letter. It floated down to the desk, landing on top of the receipts. She looked at me. Her eyes were filled with a horror so profound it made my own heart stop. "Daddy," she whispered. "Is it true?" I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. "It is true that your mother was hurt," I said. "It is true that Jay Evans was a monster. And it is true that Brad knew. But Am I yours?" she choked out. She wasn't asking about biology. She was asking about love. She was asking if the man sitting across from her, the man who had taught her to fish, who had paid for her braces, who had cried at her graduation, was a stranger. She was terrified that I was going to reject her. She thought that because I knew the truth, I would stop loving her. She thought that biology was the only thing that made a father. I stood up. I walked around the desk. I knelt in front of her, ignoring the pain in my knees. I took her hands in mine. They were cold as ice. "Maya, look at me," I commanded. She looked at me, tears spilling over her lashes. "I knew," I said. She blinked. You knew." "I knew before you were born," I said. "Your mother, she was scared. She tried to hide it. But I knew her. I knew when she was hurting. I knew something had happened that summer, and when she got pregnant, I did the math." "But you stayed," she whispered. "I stayed because I loved her," I said. "And the moment you were born, Maya, the second I held you in my arms, I didn't care about math. I didn't care about blood types. I looked at you, and I saw my daughter. I squeezed her hands. Listen to me. You are my daughter. You are a king. I raised you. I fed you. I protected you. Biology is just a blueprint, Maya. A father is the man who shows up. I showed up. Every single day." Maya sobbed, a sound that came from the depths of her soul. She threw her arms around my neck, burying her face in my shoulder, just like she did when she was 5 years old and scared of the thunder. "I thought you would hate me," she cried. "I thought you would throw me out. I could never hate you," I said, holding her tight, rocking her back and forth. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You are the only thing that matters. We stayed like that for a long time. Father and daughter united not by blood, but by something stronger, by history, by choice. Eventually her sobs turned to sniffles. She pulled back and wiped her eyes. She looked at the letter again. Then she looked at the receipts. Brad knew, she said, her voice changing. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by a cold, hard realization. He knew, I confirmed. He knew because his father told him. Jay Evans started this blackmail. And when he died, Brad found the books. He didn't stop it, Maya. He didn't come to us and say, I am sorry my father was a monster. He picked up the leash. He married me, she whispered. I nodded. He married you because you were the golden goose. He thought if he married you, he could control the secret from the inside. He thought he could bleed your mother dry, and then when she died, he would have the leverage over you. He threatened Mom, she said, pointing at the letter. He told her he would tell me I was a bastard on my wedding day. I saw the fire ignite in her eyes. It was the same fire I had felt in the warehouse. He used my life as a weapon, she hissed. He looked at me every day. He slept in my bed. He ate my food, and the whole time he was holding a knife to my mother's throat. That is exactly what he did, I said. He didn't love you, Maya. He loved the power he had over you. He loved the money that silence bought. She stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the garden. Her posture had changed. She wasn't slumping anymore. She was standing straight. I loved him, she said softly. I really loved him. I thought he was just unlucky. I thought he was stressed. I defended him to you. I know, I said. That is what good people do, Maya. They trust. They believe. And he laughed at me, she said, turning around. Her face was hard. Her eyes were dry. He laughed at me while he was stealing from my mother. He watched her cry, and he cashed the checks. She walked back to the desk. She picked up the receipts. She looked at the total. $2 million. He killed her, she said. He didn't pull a trigger, but he killed her. The stress, the fear, it killed her heart. I nodded. Yes, he did. Maya looked at me. What are we going to do, Daddy? I sat back on the edge of the desk. We are going to finish it, I said. He is in jail, but he is going to try to get out. He is going to try to use this secret. He thinks that if he threatens to go public with your parentage, we will drop the charges. He thinks we are still afraid of the truth. Are we? She asked. I looked at her. Are we? Maya picked up the letter. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she ripped it in half. No, she said. I am not afraid. I am Otis King's daughter, and I don't negotiate with terrorists. I smiled. It was a fierce, proud smile. Good, I said. Because I have a plan. What plan? We need to nail the coffin shut, I said. We have the kidnapping. We have the assault. But I want him for everything. I want him for the extortion. I want him for the fraud. And to get him for that, we need him to admit it. We need him to think he still has a card to play. How do we do that? We play his game, I said. He thinks you are weak, Maya. He thinks you are broken. He thinks that if he can just get you alone, he can talk his way out of this. He thinks he can convince you to drop the charges by threatening to tell the world about your biological father. So we are going to let him try, I said. You are going to go to him. You are going to tell him you still love him. You are going to tell him you want to fix this. You are going to offer him a way out. Maya frowned. A way out. A fake way out, I said. You're going to tell him that I am willing to sign the power of attorney, that I am scared, that I want to make a deal to keep the secret. She understood. I saw the gears turning in her mind. You want me to trap him. I want you to bury him, I said. I want you to get him to admit on tape that he blackmailed your mother. I want him to admit that he married you for the money. I want him to say it to your face while the police are listening. Can you do it, I asked. Can you look him in the eye and lie to him the way he lied to you? Maya looked at the receipts again. She looked at the broken pieces of her life. She took a deep breath. When do we start, she asked. Tomorrow, I said. He will call you. He will use his one phone call to call you not a lawyer. He thinks you are his puppet. Let him call, she said, her voice cold as steel. I will be ready. I hugged her again. You are a warrior, Maya, I said. Just like your mother. She pulled back. No, Daddy, she said. Just like you. We stood there in the quiet study, the evidence of 45 years of pain scattered on the desk between us. The secret was out. The weapon was disarmed. Brad Evans had spent his life building a cage for us. He didn't realize he had just handed us the key, and we were going to lock him inside it and throw away the key. Go get some sleep. Baby girl, I said, you have a big performance tomorrow. She nodded. She walked to the door. She stopped and looked back. Daddy, yes, thank you for choosing me. I smiled. It was the easiest choice I ever made. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen blinds, casting long stripes of light across the table where Brad sat drumming his fingers on the granite countertop. He was vibrating with a nervous energy that filled the room like static electricity. He had barely slept. I could tell by the dark circles under his eyes and the way he kept checking his phone as if expecting a call from the executioner. He was a man on the edge of a cliff waiting for a wind to either blow him back to safety or push him over. I sat in my usual spot, my hands wrapped around a mug of warm water. I was back in character. My shoulders were slumped, my eyes were watery and unfocused, and I had a slight tremor in my left hand that I had perfected over the last few weeks. To Brad, I looked like a defeated old man, a crumbling relic who had finally run out of fight. He didn't know that beneath the flannel shirt my heart was beating with the steady rhythm of a hydraulic press ready to crush steel. Maya walked into the room. She looked pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She was wearing a simple blue dress that made her look younger, more vulnerable. She carried a sheaf of papers in her hand. She stopped in the doorway looking at her husband. Well, Brad barked, standing up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. Did you talk to him? Is he going to do it? Maya took a deep breath. She looked at me, then she looked at Brad. It was the performance of a lifetime. She let her lip quiver just enough to look terrified. He agreed, Brad, she whispered. Brad let out a whoop of joy that echoed off the ceiling. He pumped his fist in the air like he had just scored a touchdown. I knew it, he shouted. I knew the old mule would break. It just took a little pressure. He walked over to me, grinning that shark smile. You made the right choice, Otis, he said, patting my cheek with a little too much force. Finally, you are going to be safe now. We are going to take care of everything. I looked up at him, blinking slowly. I just want peace, I mumbled, my voice raspy. I am tired, Brad. I don't want to fight anymore. You don't have to fight, Pop Brad said. You just have to sign. Where is the pen, Maya? Let us get this done right now. Wait, Maya said, stepping between us. He has a condition. Brad's smile faltered. What condition? He is in no position to make demands. He wants to do it at the bank, Maya said. He says he doesn't trust the house anymore. He says he wants a notary. He wants it to be official. Brad frowned. The bank. Why the bank? We can get a notary here. He is scared, Brad, Maya lied smoothly. He thinks if he signs it here, it won't be real. He is confused. You know how he gets about official buildings. He says he will only sign the power of attorney if he is sitting in a bank vault. I watched Brad's face. I saw the calculation. He was weighing the risk. Going to the bank meant exposure. It meant cameras. It meant witnesses. But it also meant legitimacy. If I signed the papers in front of a bank manager, no one could ever claim I was coerced. It would be ironclad. And he was greedy. He was so close to the finish line he could taste it. Fine, he said, checking his watch. Which bank? First City Trust, Maya said. The main branch downtown. First City Trust. It was the bank where I had opened my first business account 50 years ago. It was the bank that had given me a loan when no one else would because the manager back then saw something in my eyes. It was the bank where I now sat on the board of directors under a holding company name. It was the bank where I owned 15% of the stock. Brad didn't know that. To him, it was just a building with money in it. Get your coat, Otis, Brad said, grabbing his car keys. We are going for a ride. The ride to the city was excruciating. Brad drove his BMW like a man possessed, weaving through traffic, honking at anyone who slowed him down. He was high on adrenaline. He was already spending the money in his head. You know, babe, he said to Maya, glancing at her in the rearview mirror, we should look at boats this weekend. I saw a Sunseeker online, 60-footer. We deserve it after all this stress. We can dock it in the marina. Call it the Legacy. Maya looked out the window, her hands clenched in her lap. She didn't answer. Brad didn't notice her silence. He was too busy monologuing. "And we need to get rid of that truck," he said, gesturing to my pickup in the driveway as we pulled away. "It is an eyesore. We will get you a driver, Otis. A nice town car. You won't have to worry about driving anymore." I sat in the back seat listening to him dismantle my life. He talked about selling my land. He talked about liquidating my stocks. He talked about putting me in a luxury suite at a facility which I knew meant a room with a lock on the door. He was dissecting me while I was still alive, but I wasn't listening to his words. I was watching the city pass by. I was watching the buildings I had helped build, the bridges I had engineered. This was my city, and he was just a tourist. We pulled up to First City Trust. It was a fortress of limestone and brass standing tall in the financial district. It looked impenetrable. Brad parked in the loading zone, ignoring the signs. He got out and opened my door. "Let's go, Otis," he said, pulling me out. "Chop, chop." I stumbled a little, leaning heavily on my cane. I looked at the building. I looked at the security guards standing by the revolving doors. They were big men, professional. Brad marched us toward the entrance, his hand gripping my elbow tight. He was practically dragging me. "Act normal," he hissed in my ear. "Don't embarrass me. Just walk in, sign the paper, and we go home." We walked into the lobby. The air was cool and smelled of polished marble. The ceilings were high, echoing with the hushed sounds of commerce. Brad walked straight to the reception desk, bypassing the line of people waiting for tellers. "I need to see the manager," he demanded loudly. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, looked up. She frowned at his tone. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" she asked. "I don't need an appointment," Brad said, leaning over the desk. "I am here with Mr. Otis King. We have urgent business." Sarah looked at me. Her eyes widened slightly. She knew who I was. Everyone in this building knew who Mr. King was. I gave her the slightest shake of my head, a microscopic movement that told her to play along. "One moment, sir," she said. She picked up the phone. I saw her press the button for the executive suite. "Mr. Sterling," she said. "Mr. King is here." "Yes." "With guests." She hung up. "Mr. Sterling will see you now," she said, pointing to the heavy double doors at the end of the hall. "The VIP suite." Brad smirked at me. "See Otis," he whispered. "That is how you get things done. You demand respect." We walked down the hall. Brad was strutting now. He felt important. He felt powerful. He was walking into the VIP room of a major bank about to take control of millions of dollars. He didn't notice that the security guard had quietly followed us and was now standing by the lobby doors. He didn't notice that the bank was unusually quiet. We reached the double doors. There was a brass plaque on the wood, "Private Client Services." Brad pushed the doors open. The room was impressive: mahogany paneling, leather chairs, a conference table that cost more than Brad's car, and a view of the city skyline that was breathtaking. Sitting at the head of the table was Mr. Sterling, the bank manager. He wasn't alone. Standing next to him was a man in a uniform, Sheriff Miller. And sitting in the corner quietly taking notes was Atticus, my lawyer. Brad stopped. He looked at the sheriff. He looked at Atticus. He frowned. "Who are these people?" he asked. "I just need a notary." "Mr. Sterling stood up. He was a tall man with silver hair and a suit that fit perfectly. "Mr. Evans," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "Please come in. We have been expecting you." Brad hesitated. "Why is there a sheriff?" he asked. "Formalities," Sterling said. "For a transaction of this magnitude, for a transfer of power of attorney over such a significant estate, we require witnesses, security protocols." Brad relaxed. "Of course," he said, puffing out his chest. "The estate is significant. You are right to be careful." He walked into the room, pulling me with him. Maya followed, closing the doors behind us. The click of the latch was loud. Brad sat me down in a leather chair. He sat next to me. He put the papers on the table. "Here it is," he said, sliding the document toward Sterling. "The power of attorney, signed by Otis King. We just need it notarized and filed. Then I need to access the accounts immediately. There are pressing debts that need to be settled." Sterling looked at the paper. He didn't touch it. He just looked at it. "You seem to be in a hurry," Mr. Evans, Sterling said. "I am a busy man," Brad said, leaning back and crossing his legs. "Business waits for no one." I looked at Brad. He was smiling. It was a smile of total victory. He thought he had won. He thought he had navigated the storm and arrived at the port. He was dreaming of the yacht. He was dreaming of the parties. He didn't see the shark fins circling the boat. I looked at Maya. She was standing by the door, her arms crossed. She wasn't looking at Brad. She was looking at me. Her eyes were sad, but steady. She nodded. It was time. I sat up straighter in my chair. I set my cane against the table. I took off my glasses and cleaned them slowly with my handkerchief. Brad nudged me. "What are you doing, Otis?" "Just sit there." I put my glasses back on. I looked at Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," I said. My voice wasn't raspy anymore. It wasn't weak. It was the voice that had commanded 1,000 men. "Yes, Mr. King Sterling," replied respectfully. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding," I said. Brad turned to look at me. "What are you talking about, Dad?" "Shut up!" I ignored him. "Mr. Evans seems to think he is here to take control of my money," I said, "but I believe he is here for a different transaction entirely." Brad laughed nervously. "He is confused again. See? This is why we need the papers. He doesn't know where he is." "I know exactly where I am, Brad," I said, turning to face him. "I am in the boardroom of First City Trust, a bank where I have been the majority shareholder for 20 years. Brad blinked. "What?" "I own this bank, Brad," I said, "or at least enough of it to fire anyone in this building." Brad stared at me. His smile faltered. You are lying. You are a mechanic. You have a pension. I have a diversified portfolio, Brad," I said, "including this building, including the land your house sits on, including the debt you owe to the Russians." Brad stood up. He knocked his chair over. "This is a trick," he shouted. "Maya, what is going on? Why is he talking like that?" Maya stepped forward. She walked past him. She came to stand beside me. She put her hand on my shoulder. "He isn't talking like that because he is crazy." "Brad," she said, "he is talking like that because he is done pretending." Brad looked at her. He looked at me. He looked at the sheriff who had uncrossed his arms and was resting his hand on his holster. He looked at the papers on the table. The papers he thought were his ticket to freedom. He realized suddenly that they weren't a ticket. They were a confession. "But," he stammered, "the doctor, the pills, you took them. I saw you. I have a very good sleight of hand," I said. "And a very good chemist." Brad backed away. He hit the edge of the table. He looked trapped. "You can't prove anything," he whispered. "It is my word against yours." I pointed to the ceiling, to the corner of the room. "See that camera, Brad?" I asked. "It is 4K resolution. And see that one?" I pointed to the clock on the wall. "And the one in my button." I tapped my chest. "And the one in your car," I added. "The one that recorded you threatening to kill me." Brad's legs gave out. He sat back down in the chair hard. He looked at the sheriff. Is this a sting?" he asked. Sheriff Miller smiled. "No, son," Miller said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "A sting is when we have to trick you. This is just a delivery service." Brad looked at me one last time. His eyes were filled with tears. "Dad," he whispered, "please." I leaned forward. I looked deep into his eyes. "I am not your dad." "Brad," I said, "I am the man who is going to make sure you never hurt anyone ever again." I nodded to the sheriff. "Take out the trash, Jim." Brad Evans started to scream, but it was too late. The trap had snapped shut, and the lion was finally eating. The leather chair in the private conference room of First City Trust was comfortable, but the air in the room was so thick with tension it felt hard to breathe. Brad was pacing back and forth, his shoes clicking on the marble floor, a sound that betrayed his desperate impatience. He looked at his watch every 30 seconds, wiping sweat from his upper lip. He thought he was minutes away from salvation. He thought that as soon as I put my pen to that paper, his debts would vanish, his gambling losses would be covered, and he would be the king of the castle. He didn't look at me. To him, I was just an obstacle, a senile old man who had finally been broken. He didn't see the fire in my eyes because he never bothered to look. Maya stood by the window, her back to us. She was trembling. Brad thought she was crying from stress, from the sorrow of putting her father's affairs in order. He didn't know she was shaking from rage. He didn't know she was counting down the seconds, just like I was waiting for the trap to snap shut. "Where is the manager?" Brad snapped, slamming his hand on the mahogany table. "This is ridiculous. We are VIP clients. We shouldn't have to wait." "He is coming, Brad," I mumbled, letting my head LOL to the side. My hand shook as I held the heavy fountain pen hovering over the signature line of the power of attorney document. "Just sign it." "Otis," Brad hissed, leaning over me. "You don't need the manager to start. Just put your name on the line. Right there. Do it now." I looked at the paper. It was a death warrant for my freedom. It gave him everything. My accounts, my property, my life. I can't see the line," I whispered. Brad grabbed my hand. He forced the pen down. "I will guide you," he said, his voice tight with greed. "Just hold the pen." The double doors at the end of the room swung open. Brad looked up, expecting a notary with a stamp. He expected a smiling banker ready to hand over the keys to the vault. Instead, Mr. Sterling walked in. He wasn't smiling. He was wearing a dark suit that looked like armor, and he wasn't alone. Walking beside him was Sheriff Miller. Jim, my friend of 40 years. He was in full uniform, his hand resting casually on his belt, his eyes locked on Brad. Behind them, 2 deputies took up positions at the door, blocking the exit. Brad froze. His hand was still gripping mine, forcing the pen into the paper. He looked at the sheriff. He looked at the banker. He looked at Maya. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "What is going on? I asked for a notary, not a police escort." Mr. Sterling walked to the head of the table. He placed a single folder on the polished wood. "Mr. Evans," he said, his voice cool and professional, "there has been a change of plans. We are not here to notarize a power of attorney." Brad let go of my hand. He straightened up, trying to regain his composure, trying to play the role of the concerned relative. "I don't understand," he said. "My father-in-law is confused. We are just trying to help him manage his assets. He is voluntarily signing this. Tell them, Otis. Tell them you want this." He looked at me, his eyes pleading and threatening at the same time. "Play along, old man, or else." I looked at the pen in my hand. It was a Mont Blanc, heavy, balanced. I set it down on the table with a deliberate click. I sat up straight. I rolled my shoulders back, shedding the slump of the invalid. I took off my glasses and folded them, placing them next to the pen. I looked at Brad. I didn't blink. I didn't shake. The fog in my eyes cleared, replaced by the cold, hard stare of the man who had built bridges over rushing water. "I don't want this, Brad," I said. My voice was deep, steady, and strong. It filled the room. Brad stumbled back as if I had slapped him. He stared at me. What did you say?" he whispered. "I said no," I repeated. He looked at Maya. She turned from the window. Her face was dry. Her eyes were cold. She walked over and stood behind my chair, her hand on my shoulder. "It is over, Brad," she said. Brad looked around the room, realizing the walls were closing in. He laughed, a frantic, high-pitched sound. You are having an episode?" he stammered, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You are lucid for a second, but you are sick." "Officer, my father-in-law is mentally incompetent. He doesn't know what he is saying." "I have a doctor's note." "You have a forgery," I said, standing up. I walked around the table. I moved without the cane, without the limp. I walked right up to him until I was looking down into his sweating face. "You think I am senile?" I asked. "You think I am weak?" I reached into my pocket. I didn't pull out a checkbook. I pulled out my phone. I swiped the screen and pressed play. I set the phone on the table. The volume was turned all the way up. Brad's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. The old man fell. "If he dies, even better. Maybe it is a blessing. If he dies, the problems go away. The debts go away." Brad went pale. He backed away until he hit the wall. That is not me. That is AI. That is fake." I let the recording play. "Just wait 10 minutes. Then we call. We say we found him like this." I stopped the audio. "I recorded that 2 nights ago, Brad," I said. "While I was lying at the bottom of the stairs with a bruised hip and a bleeding head. While you were standing over me debating whether to call an ambulance or let me die." He shook his head frantically. No, you fell. It was an accident." I played the next clip. The one from the kitchen. We make him really lose his mind. We switch his medications. We hide his things. In a month, any doctor will certify that he is mentally ill. I looked at him. "Is that an accident too, Brad?" I asked. "Is poisoning my tea an accident? Is paying a forger $50,000 an accident?" Brad looked at the sheriff. He looked for a way out. But there was no way out. "You can't prove anything," he screamed. "Those are just recordings. You can't use them." We have the toxicology report, son Miller said, stepping forward. We have the blood work. We have the pills you flushed. We have the testimony of the forger who is currently in federal custody. We have everything. Brad looked at Maya. Help me, he begged. Maya, please. They are lying. Your dad is crazy. He is setting me up. Maya looked at him with absolute disgust. You tried to kill him, she said. You pushed him down the stairs, and then you tried to sell my house. I didn't try to sell it, I had to... The debts. The Russians. Ah, yes, I said. The Russians. I walked back to the table and opened the folder Sterling had brought in. You owe $5 million to the Ivanov Syndicate, I said. Gambling debts. Failed schemes. They were going to break your legs if you didn't pay by Friday. That is why you were so desperate. That is why you needed my signature today. Brad sank into a chair. He put his head in his hands. They are going to kill me, he sobbed. If I go to jail, they have people inside. They will kill me. I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. No, they won't, I said. He looked up hopeful. They won't kill you because you don't owe them anymore, I said. He blinked. What? I bought the debt, I said. The room went silent. Brad stared at me, his mouth open. I bought it, Brad. I bought your promissory note from the Ivanovs this morning. I bought your mortgage from Ironwood Capital. I bought your car loan. I bought your credit card debt. I leaned over the table. I own you, I whispered. You paid them, he stammered. You paid $5 million for me. I paid $5 million to own the right to destroy you, I corrected him. I didn't pay it to save you. I paid it so that I could be the one to collect. I picked up the pen he had tried to force me to use. You wanted me to sign a power of attorney, I said. I am not going to sign that. I pulled a document from the folder. I am signing a freezing order, I said. I signed the paper with a flourish. This order freezes every asset you have, I explained. It garnishes every wage you will ever earn. It seizes any property you might try to hide. You are bankrupt, Brad. But you can't declare bankruptcy because the debt is now held by a private party who has proof of fraud. That debt will follow you until the day you die. You can't do that, he screamed, standing up. That is illegal. It is business, I said, cold as ice. You wanted to play in the big leagues, son. Welcome to the majors. Brad lunged at me. He lost his mind. He screamed a sound of pure animal rage and threw himself across the table, his hands reaching for my throat. He didn't make it. Sheriff Miller moved with a speed that belied his age. He tackled Brad midair, slamming him onto the polished table. The wood groaned. Brad grunted as the air left his lungs. Stay down, Miller shouted, twisting Brad's arm behind his back. Get off me, Brad yelled, kicking and thrashing. The deputies swarmed in. They pulled him off the table and threw him to the floor. I watched from above, calm and untouched. Brad Evans Miller said, pulling out his handcuffs. You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Otis King, for extortion, for grand larceny, for elder abuse, and for assaulting an officer. The cuffs clicked shut. It was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. Brad lay on the floor, his face pressed against the cold marble. He looked up at me. He was crying. Snot and tears ran down his face. Dad, he whimpered. Please, I am sorry. I will pay you back. I will work. I will do anything. I looked down at him. You had 5 years to work, I said. You had 5 years to be a man. Instead, you chose to be a leech. I signaled to the deputies. Get him out of here, I said. He is dirtying my floor. They hauled him up. He was limp, dead weight. He looked at Maya as they dragged him toward the door. Maya, baby, please, he begged. Don't let them take me. Maya didn't look away. She didn't cry. She looked at him with the hard eyes of a woman who has finally seen the truth. Goodbye, Brad, she said. They dragged him out. His screams echoed down the hallway of the bank he thought he was going to rob. I am sorry. I am sorry. The doors closed. The silence returned. Mr. Sterling looked at me. He adjusted his tie. I will file the freezing order immediately, Mr. King, he said, and I will have the security tapes sent to the DA's office within the hour. Thank you, Marcus, I said. I turned to my daughter. She was standing by the window looking out at the city. She looked tired. She looked sad. But she looked free. I walked over to her. I put my arm around her. "It is done, baby girl," I said. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "He really hated us, didn't he?" she whispered. "He hated himself," I said. "We were just the mirror." She took a deep breath. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," I said, steering her toward the door, "we go get some lunch. And then we go see a lawyer about a divorce." We walked out of the VIP room. The bank lobby was quiet. Life was going on. People were depositing checks. People were opening accounts. They didn't know that a tragedy had just ended upstairs. But I knew. I walked out into the sunshine, my daughter by my side. My leg hurt. My heart hurt. But my head was held high. I had cut out the rot. Now it was time to heal. The county lockup smelled of pine sol and unwashed bodies, a scent that clung to the back of the throat like a bad memory. I wasn't inside a cell. I was standing in the observation area of the visitation room, watching through the reinforced glass as my son-in-law tried to salvage his life with a single phone call. Brad looked small in the orange jumpsuit. The arrogance that had worn like a second skin for 5 years had been stripped away, leaving behind a shivering boy who realized too late that the world had teeth. His face was still swollen from where he had hit the table at the bank. His lips split, a jagged line of dried blood marking his failure. He was gripping the receiver of the wall phone with both hands, his knuckles white. I had asked Sheriff Miller to let me listen in, not because I needed evidence. I had enough evidence to bury him under the jail. I listened because I wanted to know if there was any humanity left in him. I wanted to know who he would call when the darkness fell. He didn't call a lawyer. He didn't call a priest. He called his mother. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Mom, you have to help me. They arrested me. They denied bail. You have to put up the house. You have to call the bondsman." I listened to the silence on the other end. Then I heard the shrill, hysterical voice of Joyce Evans, Brad's mother, a woman who had spent 40 years spending the money her husband extorted from my wife. "We can't." "Brad," she screamed. Her voice was tinny through the speaker, but the panic was clear. "We can't put up the house. It is frozen. Everything is frozen." "What are you talking about?" Brad hissed, glancing around to see if the guards were listening. "Just go to the bank. Use Dad's account, the Blue Jay account." "There is no Blue Jay account," she shrieked. "We were served this morning, Brad. A lawsuit. Racketeering, extortion, fraud from Otis King." Brad froze. The receiver slipped slightly in his hand. "From Otis." "He knows, Brad," she wailed. "He knows about your father. He knows about the payments. He knows about Coretta. His lawyers, they have records going back to 1979. They froze the assets pending a criminal investigation into the source of funds. They say the money is stolen property. They say we lived on blood money for 40 years. I watched Brad's face. The blood drained out of it, leaving him gray and ashen. He looked like a man who had just watched the ground open up and swallow his last lifeline. "He can't do that," Brad stammered. "That is Dad's money." "It was never your father's money," Joyce cried. "It was Coretta's money. And now Otis wants it back. Plus interest, plus damages. They are taking the house, Brad. They are taking the cars. Your father, they are going to dig him up. They are talking about exhuming him for DNA tests to prove the blackmail. I can't help you. I need a lawyer for myself. Don't call here again. They are listening." The line went dead. Brad stared at the phone. He tapped the receiver frantically. "Mom. Mom." He slammed the phone against the wall. He screamed a sound of pure, impotent rage. He turned and kicked the metal stool, sending it clattering across the concrete floor. "It is her fault," he yelled at the empty room. "It is that bitch, Maya," she told him. "She ruined everything." He wasn't blaming himself. He wasn't blaming his greed. He was blaming the victim. He was blaming my daughter, the woman he had tried to sell to the mob. He started pacing the small cage, running his hands through his greasy hair. "She set me up," he muttered, his eyes wild. "She played the innocent wife while her father sharpened the knife. They planned this. They planned it all." He stopped and looked at the glass. He couldn't see me through the one-way mirror, but he sensed eyes on him. He lunged at the window, pounding on the glass with his fists. "I know you are watching, Otis," he screamed. "You think you are smart. You are just a lucky old man. You are nothing. You are a gardener in a suit. Let me out, and I will show you." I signaled the guard. "Bring him to the table," I said. The guard nodded. He opened the door and grabbed Brad, dragging him to the metal table bolted to the floor. He cuffed Brad's hands to the ring in the center. "Sit down," the guard barked. "You have a visitor." I walked out of the observation room and into the visitation area. I was wearing my best suit, the one I wore when I bought the bank. I carried my cane, but I didn't lean on it. I held it like a scepter. Brad looked up. His eyes widened. He tried to lunge at me, but the cuffs held him back. "You!" he hissed. "You ruined my life." I sat down opposite him. I placed my hat on the table. I looked him in the eye. "I didn't ruin your life, Brad," I said calmly. "I just turned on the lights. You were the one living in the dark." "You took my mother's house," he spat. "You sued a widow. I sued an accomplice," I corrected him. "Your mother lived for 40 years on the tears of my wife. She drove cars bought with my wife's fear. She ate food paid for with my wife's silence. She isn't a widow, Brad. She is a beneficiary of a crime, and I am repossessing the proceeds." He glared at me. "You are evil. You are a cold-hearted bastard. Maya will never forgive you for this. When she finds out what you did to me..." "Maya knows," I said. He blinked. "Maya knows everything," I continued. "She knows about the blackmail. She knows about the loan sharks. She knows you tried to trade her for your debt. She is the one who gave me the power of attorney over her affairs, Brad. She asked me to bury you." "Liar," he screamed. "She loves me. She needs me. She is weak without me. She was weak because you were draining her strength," I said. "But she is a king, and kings don't stay weak for long." I leaned forward. "But I didn't come here to talk about Maya. I came here to talk about you. And me." He sneered. "What is there to talk about? You won. You have the money. You have the cops. Bully for you. You still don't get it, do you?" I asked. "You still think this is about luck. You think I just happened to be rich. You think I stumbled into a fortune and you were just unlucky enough to get caught trying to take it. Isn't that it?" he asked. "You were a mechanic, a construction worker. You got lucky with some land deals. You aren't smart, Otis. You are just persistent." I smiled. It was a smile that showed all my teeth. "You think I am stupid," I said softly. "You think because I talk slow and I dress simple and my skin is black that I am simple. You looked at me for 5 years and you saw a mark. You saw a resource to be mined." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a blueprint, an old blueprint faded and blue. "Do you know what this is?" I asked, unfolding it on the table. "It is a drawing," Brad said dismissively. "It is the structural schematic for the Bay Bridge expansion," I said. 1982. The city engineers said it couldn't be done. The soil was too unstable. The seismic load was too high. They were going to scrap the project. I tapped the paper. I redesigned the pilings, I said. I calculated the shear force on a napkin in a diner at 3 in the morning. I walked into the city council meeting in my work boots and I showed them how to save the bridge. They didn't want to listen. They laughed at me. They called me boy. I leaned closer. But they listened when I showed them the math. Because math doesn't care about your skin color, Brad. Math doesn't care about your suit. Math is the truth. And the truth was, I was the only man in that room who knew how to keep that bridge from falling into the ocean. I built that bridge, I said. And then I built the tunnels. And then I built the skyline you look at from your stolen apartment. I didn't get lucky. I built this city while you were still learning how to tie your shoes." Brad stared at me. He looked at the blueprint. He looked at my hands. The hands he thought were just good for holding a wrench. You are an engineer," he whispered. "I am the engineer," I said. "And for 5 years I watched you try to engineer a scam. And Brad, it was sloppy. It was lazy. You didn't check the foundation. You didn't check the load-bearing walls. You just started digging." I sat back. "You thought I was a stupid old black man," I said, letting the anger bleed into my voice for the first time. "You thought I was a dinosaur. But you forgot that dinosaurs ruled the earth for millions of years because they were the apex predators." Brad swallowed hard. He looked small. He looked like a child who had been caught playing with matches. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Now," I said, "you pay." "I owe you $5 million," he said. "I can't pay that. I will never be able to pay that." "I know," I said. "That is why you aren't going to pay me in money. You are going to pay me in time." I stood up. I put on my hat. "The district attorney is going to offer you a plea deal," I said. 15 years. If you take it, you go to a minimum security facility. You work in the laundry. You keep your head down. And if I don't, he asked. If you don't, I said, I will use every cent of my $350 million to make sure you go to trial. And at that trial, I will bring in the Russians. I will bring in the forger. I will bring in the doctor. I will bring in every single person you have lied to, and you will get life. 15 years, he whispered. I will be 50. You will be alive, I said, which is more than you deserve after what you tried to do to me. I walked to the door. I knocked for the guard. Otis Brad called out. I stopped. I didn't turn around. Why didn't you tell us, he asked. Why did you hide the money? If we had known, we wouldn't have done this. I turned my head slightly. That is exactly why I hid it, I said. Because I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for what I had. And you proved me right. You never loved me. You only loved the gold. I walked out of the room. The door clanged shut behind me, sealing him in his concrete box. I walked down the hallway. I felt lighter. The weight of the secret was gone. The weight of the betrayal was gone. I had built a city. I had built a fortune. And now I had dismantled a lie. I walked out into the parking lot. Ink was waiting for me, leaning against his car. How did it go, he asked. He knows, I said. He knows he picked a fight with the wrong man. Ink nodded. Good. We got into the car. Take me to the cemetery. Ink, I said. I need to tell Coretta something. What do you need to tell her? I need to tell her the debt is paid, I said. I need to tell her she is free. We drove away from the jail, leaving Brad Evans in the shadow of the walls I had paid for. He was in my world now. And in my world, you pay what you owe. The ink on the divorce papers was still wet when Maya handed them to the clerk, but she didn't look back. For the first time in 5 years, she walked out of a government building with her head held high. She wasn't Mrs. Evans anymore. She was Maya King. The judge had granted the dissolution in record time, mostly because the defendant was currently sitting in a county jail cell, unable to contest anything. Brad had tried to send letters through his public defender pleading for a settlement, but Maya had burned them unopened. She was done negotiating with terrorists. The next morning, I didn't let her sleep in. I woke her up at 6 a.m. with a cup of coffee and a hard hat. Where are we going? She asked, rubbing sleep from her eyes. We are going to work, I said. You spent 5 years letting a thief manage your life. Now you are going to learn how to own it. I took her to the headquarters of King Construction. Not the small office I used for public meetings, but the real operations center in the industrial district. It was a brick building that smelled of blueprints and old money. I walked her past the secretaries who nodded with respect, past the engineers who were already arguing over schematics, and into the main conference room. I laid it all out on the table, the ledgers, the property deeds, the shell companies, the offshore trusts. This is the empire, I said. It isn't just a pile of money, Maya. It is a living, breathing thing. It needs to be fed, it needs to be protected, and it needs a leader. I watched her eyes widen as she turned the pages. She saw the scale of what I had built. She saw the bridges, the high-rises, the affordable housing projects. She saw the power that her husband had tried to steal. I don't know if I can do this, Daddy, she whispered. I am not an engineer. I am not you. You don't have to be me, I said. You just have to be honest. That is the one qualification Brad never had. You can hire engineers, you can hire accountants, but you can't hire character. You have that in your blood. For the next month, I put her through boot camp. I didn't go easy on her. I taught her how to read a balance sheet until her eyes crossed. I taught her how to spot a contractor who was padding his bill. I taught her how to negotiate a lease without giving away an inch of ground. She was a natural. She had Coretta's patience and my stubbornness. I saw her stare down a supplier who tried to raise the price of steel by 10%. She didn't yell. She just sat there looking at him with those cool, dark eyes until he started sweating and lowered the price back down. But even as she grew stronger in the boardroom, I could see she was breaking apart at home. She would sit in the living room at night staring at her mother's empty chair. She would touch the photos on the mantel. The guilt was eating her alive. One night I found her in the kitchen crying over a cup of tea. It wasn't the poisoned tea anymore, but the memory of it hung in the air. It is my fault, she sobbed when I sat down next to her. Mom died because of me, because of who I am, because of the secret. I took her hands. Her hands were rougher now from visiting job sites. "No baby girl," I said. "She spent 45 years paying for me," Maya cried. "She paid $2 million to hide the fact that I wasn't yours. She let them bleed her dry so I wouldn't know. If I hadn't been born, if I hadn't been a mistake, she would still be here. She would have had a life." I slammed my hand on the table. The sound made her jump. "Don't you ever say that," I said, my voice fierce. "You were never a mistake. You were her miracle, and you were mine." She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "But she suffered, Daddy. She suffered alone. She suffered to protect the truth," I said. "But she also suffered because she didn't trust me enough to handle it. That was her burden, Maya. But she carried it because she loved you more than she loved her own money. She loved you more than her own peace." I stood up. "Get your coat," I said. "Where are we going?" "We are going to go talk to her." We drove to the cemetery in silence. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges. It was the time of day Coretta loved best. The cemetery was quiet. The gates opened just for us because the caretaker knew who I was. We walked to the grave. The headstone was simple granite. Coretta King, beloved wife and mother. Maya fell to her knees in the grass. She touched the cold stone. "I am sorry, Mama," she whispered. "I am so sorry." I stood behind her, my hand on her shoulder. "She can't hear your apology, Maya," I said softly. "And she doesn't need it. What she needs is for you to understand why she did it." I looked at the grave. "Coretta sacrificed 45 years to keep a secret she thought would destroy us," I said, speaking to the stone and to my daughter. "She thought that if I knew you weren't my blood, I would leave. She thought that if you knew, you would be broken. She was wrong about me. But she was right about the love. She paid that ransom not out of shame, but out of fierce protective love. She built a wall of silence around you, brick by brick, dollar by dollar." I knelt down beside Maya. "Now the wall is down," I said. "The truth is out. The secret is dead. And look at us." I gestured between us. "Are we broken?" I asked. Maya looked at me. She shook her head. "No." "Did I leave you?" I asked. "No," she whispered. "Exactly," I said. "Her sacrifice bought you a childhood free from that pain. It bought you a father who loved you without complication. It worked, Maya. Her plan worked. It cost her everything, but it gave us this." Maya leaned her head on my shoulder. "I miss her," she said. "I miss her too," I said. "Every damn day. But we can't bring her back. We can only honor the investment she made. She invested her life in you, Maya. Don't let that investment go to waste by drowning in guilt. That is what Brad would want. He would want you to be weak. He would want you to be broken." The mention of Brad made her stiffen. "Speaking of Brad," I said, standing up and brushing the grass from my knees, "I have something to show you." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a check. It was a cashier's check made out for a very specific amount. $2,150,000. Maya frowned. "What is this?" "This is the money I recovered," I said. "This is the debt I bought from the Russians, plus the cash we seized from Brad's safe, plus the liquidation of his assets. I stripped him clean, Maya. I took back every penny he and his father stole from your mother, plus interest." She stared at the check. It was blood money. It was the price of her mother's fear. "I don't want it," she said, pulling away. "I don't want to touch it. It is dirty." "I know," I said. "That is why we aren't going to keep it. We are going to wash it. We are going to scrub it clean until it shines." "How?" I took the check and placed it on the headstone. "We are starting a fund," I said. "The Coretta King Scholarship for Women Survivors." Maya looked at me. "We are going to use this money," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "to pay for the education of women who have been victims of abuse, women who have been silenced, women who are trying to rebuild their lives after being exploited by men like Jay and Brad Evans. We are going to pay for their college. We are going to pay for their therapy. We are going to pay for their freedom." I looked at the check resting on the granite. "Brad used this money to destroy lives," I said. "We are going to use it to build them. Every time a girl graduates on this scholarship, it will be a slap in his face. Every time a woman escapes a bad marriage with our help, it will be a victory for your mother." Maya picked up the check. She held it in her hands. She looked at the amount. It wasn't just money anymore. It was ammunition. She looked up at me, and for the first time the guilt was gone from her eyes. It was replaced by purpose. Can we start it tomorrow, she asked. We can start it tonight, I said. I already have the papers drawn up. You are the president of the fund, Maya. You decide who gets the help. You are the one who turns this pain into power. She nodded. She kissed the check, then she kissed the headstone. Thank you, Mama, she whispered. We will make it right. We stood there as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the graveyard. The air was cooling down, but I felt warm. I looked at my daughter. She wasn't the scared girl who had come to me in the coffee shop. She wasn't the victim who had been nearly sold to the mob. She was a king. She had weathered the storm, and she was still standing. I opened my arms. She stepped into them. We hugged right there in front of Coretta's grave, two survivors holding on to each other in the twilight. You are a good father, she whispered into my coat. And you are a good daughter, I said. My daughter. Always. I looked over her shoulder at the city lights flickering on in the distance. Somewhere in that city, Brad was sitting in a cell staring at a concrete wall. Somewhere, Beatrice was waiting for her trial alone and friendless. But here in the quiet of the cemetery, there was peace. We had won. We hadn't just beaten them. We had transcended them. We had taken their ugly, greedy scheme and turned it into a legacy of hope. Come on, baby girl, I said, releasing her. Let us go home. We have a lot of work to do. She wiped her face and smiled. A real smile. Yes, we do, she said. We walked back to the truck, leaving the dead to rest and the past to fade. We walked toward the future. And for the first time in 45 years, the path was clear. There were no more secrets. There were no more lies. There was just us. And that was more than enough. The seasons change fast when you aren't looking over your shoulder, waiting for a knife to find your back. It has been a year since the police cars flashed their lights in the bank parking lot and dragged the parasites out of my life. I am sitting on the back porch of the house on Evergreen Terrace. The sun is going down, painting the sky in streaks of violet and gold. The air is crisp, and it smells of autumn leaves and wood smoke, not fear and antiseptic. I am drinking tea. Real tea. Tea that I brewed myself with honey and lemon, and the absolute certainty that it will nourish me, not kill me. The house is quiet, but it is not the empty, hollow silence of grief that filled these halls after Coretta died. It is a peaceful silence, the silence of a fortress that has withstood a siege and remains standing. I didn't sell the house. Brad wanted me to sell it. He wanted to turn my history into cash to feed his vices. Keeping it, renovating it, filling it with new memories, that is my final act of defiance against him. I stripped the wallpaper in the room where he slept. I burned the mattress. I repainted the walls a bright, warm yellow. It is Maya's office now, the headquarters of the Coretta King Scholarship Fund. I watch my daughter through the window. She is on the phone laughing. A year ago, she was a ghost haunting her own life, terrified of her husband, unsure of her own name. Now she is a force of nature. She runs the foundation with the precision of an engineer and the heart of her mother. She has taken the money that was used to silence us and turned it into a megaphone for women who have been abused and marginalized. Every check she writes to send a girl to college is a bullet in the heart of the legacy of Jay and Brad Evans. People ask me if I am happy. Happiness is a fleeting thing, a butterfly that lands on your shoulder for a moment and then flies away. I am something better than happy. I am content. I am secure. I am free. I think about Brad sometimes. Not often. Just when the shadow of a cloud passes over the sun. He is in a state penitentiary 3 hours away. He took a plea deal. 15 years. He spends his days making license plates and his nights wondering how he lost a game he thought he had rigged. He writes letters to Maya. She burns them unopened. He writes letters to me. I hand them to Ink, who files them away in a box labeled evidence, just in case he ever tries to crawl out from under his rock. And Beatrice, my ex-wife, the woman who poisoned my tea and my life. She is in a different facility, a minimum security prison for women. I heard she tells the other inmates she is a victim of a cruel husband who framed her. She clings to that lie because it is the only thing she has left. If she let go of it, she would have to face the truth that she is a monster who tried to murder the man who saved her. I don't hate her anymore. Hate requires energy. I just feel a profound indifference. She is a stranger to me now, a bad dream I woke up from. The most difficult part of this year wasn't the legal battles or the financial restructuring. It was making peace with the ghost of Coretta. For months I was angry. I was angry that she didn't trust me. I was angry that she suffered alone for 45 years paying a blackmailer to hide a secret that wouldn't have changed a single thing about how I felt. I would sit by her grave and argue with her. Why didn't you tell me? I would ask the stone. Why did you let them hurt you? But slowly as the seasons turned, I began to understand. She didn't do it out of weakness. She did it out of a fierce, misguided protection. She saw the world as a dangerous place for a black man in the 70s. She thought that if I knew the truth, if I knew another man had hurt her, I would have done something that would have taken me away from her. She thought she was saving me from myself. She was wrong, but she was wrong out of love, and I cannot hate her for that. I can only honor the price she paid by making sure it wasn't in vain. The scholarship fund awarded its first grants last month. 10 young women, all survivors of domestic abuse or systemic poverty, received full rides to university. I sat in the front row at the ceremony. I watched Maya hand out the certificates. She looked like a queen. She looked like a king. When she spoke, she didn't talk about victims. She talked about survivors. She talked about the strength it takes to walk away from the people who hurt you, even when those people are family. She looked at me when she said it, and in that moment, I knew that we had won. We didn't just keep the money. We didn't just keep the house. We kept our souls. I looked down at my hands. They are old hands. The skin is thin like parchment, the veins prominent rivers of blue. They have built bridges. They have poured concrete. They have held a dying wife and a newborn daughter. They have trembled with rage, and they have been steady with resolve. They are empty now. I am not holding a weapon. I am not holding a ledger. I am just holding a cup of tea. Ink comes by on Sundays. We sit on this porch and we watch the football game, or we just watch the grass grow. We don't talk about the investigation anymore. We don't talk about the wiretaps or the hidden cameras. We talk about the future. Ink is teaching Maya how to box. He says a woman should know how to throw a punch just in case. I agree. I am 78 years old. I don't know how much time I have left. But I know how I am going to spend it. I am going to spend it watching my daughter fly. I am going to spend it ensuring that the empire I built serves the people who need it, not the parasites who want to drain it. I have rewritten my will. There are no secrets in it this time. No hidden accounts, no shell companies. Everything is in the light. Everything goes to Maya and the foundation. And there is a clause, a very specific clause, that states if any person by the name of Evans ever attempts to claim a penny, the entire estate is to be liquidated and donated to the city for a park named the Otis King Center for Justice. I smile at the thought. Even from the grave, I will be watching them. The sun has dipped below the horizon now. The air is getting cold. I should go inside, but I linger for a moment longer. I think about the man I was a year ago. The man who walked into that bank with a heavy heart and a head full of confusion. I didn't know then that I was walking into a war. I didn't know that I would have to destroy my family to save it. But I did it. I sharpened the shovel, I dug the holes, and I buried the rot. I am not just a survivor. I am a victor. And victory tastes like sweet tea on a quiet porch. I stand up. My knee pops, but it holds. I walk to the door. I look back at the yard one last time. The shadows are long, but I am not afraid of the dark anymore. I know what is out there, and I know I can handle it. I open the door and walk into the warmth of my home. Maya is in the kitchen. She is humming a song. It is the same song Coretta used to hum. I am home. For 45 years, my wife lived in the shadow of a secret, paying a ransom to keep a family together that was never truly broken. She thought silence was protection, but silence is where the predators hide. I learned that you cannot buy peace with blackmail money. True love isn't about DNA or bloodlines. It's about who stands by you when the walls are crumbling. I may be old, but I am not weak. And I will spend my remaining years ensuring that no one in my family ever has to pay for the right to be loved again. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments below. Have you ever had to make a tough choice to protect your family from itself? Where are you watching from? Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about justice, resilience, and the truth that sets us free. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your heart strong.